Yo, let's go. What up, y'all? Today we're covering Cormac McCarthy's 1985 novel, Blood Meridian. And whoo boy, oh, y'all are in for one today. Hope y'all are here for some light, early Saturday afternoon, holiday weekend analysis of a nice light novel. No, that's not even funny because this novel. Okay. So we're covering Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, seminal novel, monumental, um, and we're going to dive into the text. We're going to look at form, content, and meaning, the worldview expressed. And if you want to look down in the what's up, y'all? If you want to look in the video description, I've also got a link to JD's essay analysis of this book from 2019, I think. And really, I mean, it's, shouts out to Jay over at Jay's analysis. Shouts out to JD because his essay analysis of this book really does get it. He writes about the Gnostic quest, and sort of his thesis is counter to Harold Bloom's thesis that the Judge Holden in this book is inaccessible, when in fact he is the Gnostic Demiurge. He's this book is it's hard to it's hard to dive right into what this book is, but if you've read the book, hopefully this will be enlightening for you, or just you'll find something enjoyable, or something that you may not have considered from this book. If you've never read this book, if you've never read Cormac McCarthy, then, again, I'm not urging anybody to read or go buy the book or anything. I'm just, I think that you will find this pretty interesting. And I'm also doing this one early today, or early on Saturday, because, well, first of all, we got JD tonight. And second of all, I thought this is going to be maybe a longer analysis of this McCarthy tome. So thanks for stopping by, and hope you stick around. What's up, Ellie? What's up, everybody? What's up, Jason? All my homies out there. And listen, if you got kids, if you got anybody in the room, family, make sure you put them away. Okay, hide them, because we got some pretty scandalous content coming up here, folks. No, this is a family show. Excuse me, it's not a family show. But I'm just warning you that the content here in this book is extreme. Okay, the language is. This book's unlike any other book, any other novel that I've read. So it's completely unlike any other novel I've ever read. And it's like, there are obvious comparisons with Moby Dick. There's Moby Dick, King Lear, Macbeth, Hamlet, Paradise Lost, Dante's Inferno. It's apocalyptic. It's Western, but it's a dense novel. I mean, look, I didn't even bother with the sticky notes this time, because every single page of this book is, you can't take your mind off of one word, because you'll miss something. And I'm not talking about plot or the narrative. I'm talking about the complexity of language is so intense in this book. And I would say, I'll get to my sort of thesis statement for this book in a minute, but it is, there's obvious comparisons with Moby Dick. I think it's, in a way, I think it's like a reverse Moby Dick, if that makes sense. Because the antagonist, everyone in the book is an antagonist. They're all villains, but the central villain, who really, as we'll see, he's unlike any villain in any book I've ever read, unlike anything that I've read. Judge Holden is like, he's like the embodiment of the Leviathan. He's like the white whale. Now, we did, of course, the Moby Dick analysis. Go back and look at my Moby Dick analysis. We've done Paradise Lost. We haven't done Dante's Inferno. We need to do that. Probably the Robert Pinsky translation of Dante's Inferno. We'll have to cover that coming up. We've done Macbeth. We've done Hamlet. We haven't done King Lear. We need to do that. But it's like he's like the Leviathan in human form, but he's not human, but he is. And it's almost like a reverse Moby Dick. It's a Luciferian monomania, but in reverse. If that makes sense. And it's allegorical. It works on a literal level. It works like as a history of 1849 Southwest of Texas. And heading west. It's a mythic quest across America. It's the discovery of America. It's also genocidal. It's murderous. I'm sure you could read this on a base level as like, like you could analyze it and say that it represents the early capitalistic Promethean spirit of America or something, but it's so much more than that. And the only way to really do this is to dive into the text. And this is going to be a difficult one because, like I said, every word in this it's one huge proto-American prose poem that is wholly McCarthyite. It's the obvious comparisons, like we said, are to Melville and to Shakespeare and and Milton, but Cormac McCarthy makes this book. He makes the language his own. There's nothing else like it's unlike anything else you've ever read, and he truly makes this his own work, his own thing. It's magnificent. It's magnificent and terrifying. So, all right. So I'm going to stop describing the actual novel now, and let's just dive into it. My thesis for this is, look, Jay already said it, right? So, is that essentially, there's no point in there's no point in saying something that has already been said. I'd say as well as it can be. Already, which is, if you go and look at that essay analysis, which is that this is a Gnostic quest through and through. It is the judge is the Demiurge, and there are other elements. It's apocalyptic. You could probably read the book as it's a complete hellscape. The entire book is a hellscape. There is little that is redeeming about the book. Within the book, there is their own idea of redemption, and there's and sort of transcendence, or illuminate, confirm transcendence, or illumination in the book, in their worldview, in the characters within the book. But as we'll see, it's not quite nihilistic. It's purely satanic in parts. The violence in this is so grotesque and it's so harsh, and again, it's what Yeats called a terrible beauty, right? So let's go ahead and dive in. The book was published in 1985. It's Cormac McCarthy. The subtitle is The Evening Redness in the West. And the basic plot, just to give you a rundown of the basic plot, this is going to be the only probably basic thing about this analysis before we dive into this, is that it's essentially supposed to be about this character named the Kid. He's like a 16-year-old kid. He he wakes up in media res. Cheers to everybody. Happy Memorial Day out there with your GMO drinks. And he's essentially cast out into the wilderness of the West. He's alone. He's a criminal. He's a kid, and he comes across this character named Toadvine, who ends up being one of his not buddies. There's not real buddies in the novel, but he's one of his sort of compatriots, I guess. And he's this guy with tattoos of letters on his face, almost esoteric letters on his face. and he's got no ears, and he's got this long stringy hair. And basically, he gets in a fight with them. They almost kill each other, but they don't. Then the kid sort of winds his way. He meanders through the wilderness and finds he's come upon by a group of soldiers who recruit him into the army, but not into the full army. They're irregulars. They're essentially paramilitaries. And he's given a horse, and he starts off on a donkey, and we can see, I guess, draw parallels with Christ on the donkey going into Bethlehem. The kid is innocent, so to speak, at the beginning. I mean, I'm only saying that. Oh, phone ringing. I'm only saying that because the language, it's not out of nowhere. The language in this is purely metaphysical, and there are certainly there's a religious tone to this novel. And anyway, then he's recruited by these paramilitaries, who are then slaughtered. Everyone in the book is slaughtered. And then in a town, he comes upon this gang, and they're called the Glanton Gang. The Glanton Gang is a historical gang, and part of the book is taken from the journals of Scott Chamberlain, but it's not really important because McCarthy makes it his own reality. And they're led by this guy Glanton, who is pure evil, but his Beelzebub is this guy named Judge Holden. Okay, so Judge Holden is a 7 foot tall, bald albino who speaks every language, who seems to know everything, who is it's putting it lightly to say that he's a sadistic killer. I mean, the book has everything. It has murder, infanticide. It has all of the worst possible things that you can imagine are in this book. And but the judge also, like, he's like this like trickster figure, but a Leviathan. And he reminds me of a comedy. If I were to, like, you could never film this book. You could never film it. There's no way. But if you were to cast this, I would describe the judge as looking like a combination of Baron Harkonnen in the new Dune / Kurtz in Apocalypse Now / who's the other one / the alien in Prometheus, right? He's 7 feet tall. He's bald. He's this, like, he's obviously an otherworldly figure. He also plays the fiddle, and we'll get into that because he's sort of a Nero Antichrist character. And he dances nimbly, but he speaks poetry out loud, man. And a voice. You, right? So there's a big cast of characters that, like, the gang ends up with 12 sort of anti-disciples, and the kid joins, so they're 13, and there's another guy named Tobin who's a defrocked priest. He went to Harvard Divinity School. There are these guys that are Delawares that are just killers. And basically what they're doing is they are in partnership. They are sort of an irregular paramilitary group themselves who are doing a sort of like a quasi early American Phoenix program. Okay. They've been hired by the governor of, I think, the governor of Texas, but then they go into Mexico, and it's like the governor of specific states, Chihuahua, Sonora. And they are contracted to collect scalps. And that's what they do. They essentially go through and genocide everyone that they find. Every Apache, Yuma, Chihuahua, like everywhere they go, all they do is just completely degrade, and they raise the earth, right? They destroy everything. It's total destruction. And they collect scalps and heads. There are a pair of Gemini twins in this. One of them carries an ear necklace, just like in Phoenix Program, right? Or like that real guy, Tony Poe, right? Remember in Vietnam, Colonel Tony Poe, the Ears for Beers program, and he wears a necklace of ears. And they just have this macabre, these macabre trophies that they carry around. And anyway, what happens is that's the bulk of the book, the plot, so to speak. And eventually, the kid spares someone. He spares a couple people, and then they come to a ferry. The ferry is essentially taken over by the gang. Glanton sort of usurps this doctor who runs the ferry, and then they end up overcharging people who come to take the ferry across the river. And then they just end up robbing and killing people outright. Then a tribe comes and slaughters the gang, Glanton especially, except for Judge Holden, and the kid, and Toadvine and Tobin, the guys I've described. They get away. They make their way across the desert, where they end up running back into this gimp. This they call him an imbecile in the book, but he's actually remember Nightmare Alley, right? He's the jerk in Nightmare Alley. He is that guy. He is actually that guy. And he becomes the sort of pet of the judge. The judge hunts the rest of them. The kid has a chance to kill him, but doesn't. The kid gets away. Years pass. This is towards the end of the book. Years pass. The kid kind of grows up, lives his life as sort of a drifter cowboy, until he eventually comes across the judge again in a bar. And then at the end of the book, the judge defiles and slaughters the kid. And the last scene is the judge dancing. And now that's the plot. Okay. That's what happens in the book in terms of just the basic level narrative. But that's important because it serves the purpose like as the engine for what we're going to dive into. But what we really need to do is dive into the actual text, because the book is so much more than that. It is absolutely Miltonian. It's absolutely Shakespearean in terms of the breadth of the language. And yeah, so let's go into it. Okay, so the book opens, it says, "See the child." Okay, so we're being spoken to in the second person here. "He is pale and thin. He wears a thin and ragged linen shirt. He stokes the scullery fire. Outside lie dark turned fields with rags of snow and darker woods beyond that harbor, yet a few last wolves. His folk are known for hewers of wood and drawers of water, but in truth his father has been a schoolmaster. He lies in drink. He quotes from poets whose names are now lost. The boy crouches by the fire and watches him. Night of your birth, 33. Illuminate confirm. The Leonids, they were called. God, how the stars did fall. I looked for blackness, holes in the heavens, the dipper stove. All history present in that visage, the child, the father of the man." So right away we have, we can tell that we're reading a prose poem. We're not reading a typical novel. Number one, the sentence fragments. Let's talk about the syntax and the diction. The diction in this book is incredibly complex. It's like you're reading a comprehensive encyclopedic dictionary of all things in the world. And that's purposeful because the judge, as we'll see, carries this sketchbook around where he basically records everything. He sketches, he draws, he records everything in his book. And he's asked about the book a number of times, what is the book? And some of the other guys, they don't like it. And they refuse to be drawn in his book. And he tells them, well, it doesn't matter whether you're drawn in this book because you're going to be drawn in a book. And we know that this is his sort of book of death. And it's also, I mean, he's a demiurge figure, but the way that he carries this book is purely satanic. It's like the purpose of it is that the judge is mimicking all of creation. He has a speech, one of the culminations of the book is a speech that he gives about creation and about his demiurgical notions. But the purpose of it is that he can't create, right? He's not the creator. And he wants suzerainty over everything on the earth. He wants dominion over everything on the earth. And all he can do is mimic and mock, right? That's why he's a sort of this dance macabre trickster figure. All he can do is mimic and mock and annihilate. The sentence fragments in the book essentially serve to mirror the fragmented psyche or indeed the fragmented soul of the kid, and even of us stepping into this hellscape of a world where we don't have a clear picture yet. And so the fragmentation is sort of complete. Form and content work together to produce this idea of this picture of a chaotic world that is incomplete or fractured. As the book goes on, the sentences and the syntax sort of align and sort of elongate, and we get more of a almost an Old Testament-esque line, a sort of a long spool of events, and the paragraphs become single sentences where things are sort of reeled off and named. Right there in the first paragraph, we got an allusion. I don't know if it was intentional, but it was an allusion to Rimbaud's Season in Hell, probably intentional, to A Season in Hell, where he says, when he said his folk are known for hewers of wood and drawers of water. That's in A Season in Hell, in one of the first books, where he says, the speaker says his ancestors were the best butterers of hair, right? He's describing his Gallic ancestors. And let's see. It says, the child's face is curiously untouched behind the scars, the eyes oddly innocent. They fight with fists, with feet, with bottles or knives, all races, all breeds. Only now is the child finally divested of all that he has been. His origins are become remote as his destiny, and not again in all the world's turning will there be terrains so wild and barbarous to try whether the stuff of creation may be shaped to man's will or whether his own heart is not another kind of clay. So again, Gnostic imagery, right? The imperfection of creation in this worldview in the book. Yes, and what's up, Countess? Yes, there is a super chat link. If you guys want to see, well, super chat, so to speak. If you want to see the links in the video description or in the channel description, you can support me with Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo. I really appreciate it. If you Cash App, then you can leave a message, and that would be wonderful. That's my super chat. That's my super chat until I get to 1,000 subs, and we can actually super chat for real. Thanks, Ellie, for dropping that link. Yeah, thank you guys for supporting me and for being here. I hope you're going to enjoy this, enjoy it, or at least appreciate the language of the book. And yes, and thank you for supporting me. Thanks to everybody who supported me so far, so generously. You guys have been so generous. I have the best audience here and the best chat and the most amazing friends. Shouts out to all my friends out there who also we love to support them, who have channels, especially Jerry at Exposing Powerful Lies live streams. Support, follow my homeboy Jethro on Instagram. He's the Meme King. Shouts out to H Devotional Heart. Shouts out to Rachel, based homeschool mom. Shouts out to Tristan at Primal Edge Health and Church of the Eternal Logos, DPH. Shouts out to my homeboy Soul Purpose at ACR, Alternate Current Radio, and check out his Instagram. And of course, shouts out to Jay Dyer over at Jay's Analysis. And thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate y'all. Jeff is on YouTube right now with us. Shouts out to Extra Crispy, my friend over there across the pond. And yes, follow Jethro on Instagram. And shouts out to former Ghost, Ellie, Jason, David, TGF. Shouts out to everybody out there. I didn't mean that to be sarcastic, Crispy. I'm sorry if it came across that way. It wasn't funny. I'm sorry. So yeah, we have the year 1849. Okay, here we go. Page 6 of the book. Neighbor, said the Reverend, he couldn't stay out of these here hell holes right here in Nagadoches. I said it to him, said, you going to take the Son of God in there with you? And he said, oh, no, I ain't. And I said, don't you know that he said, I will follow you always, even to the end of the road. And here comes the judge. He was bald as a stone, and he had no trace of beard, and he had no brows to his eyes, nor lashes to them. He was close on to 7 feet in height, and he stood smoking a cigar, even in this nomadic house of God, and he seemed to have removed his hat only to chase the rain from it, for now he put it on again. And here we have like false prophet diction and imagery. Every church in this book, by the way, is completely desecrated. Every time they come across a church, it's desecrated with animals and the dead lying in the chancellery. And they, there's a murder committed in one of the churches. So what happens here is the kid comes across basically a faith healer in a revival tent. And all of a sudden the judge, the judge, whom he doesn't know, busts into the church, into the tent. His face was serene and strangely childlike. His hands were small. He held them out. Now, the reason that the judge is an albino and bald and so big is not only is he a Leviathan, is he sort of a Leviathan in an anti-Moby Dick, right, where the Leviathan takes charge, but bringing down the rest of these people. But he's also supposed to be a moonchild, essentially. He is the incarnation of this demiurge spirit, and his innocence is supposed to belie the fact that he is pure evil. Does that make sense? We'll get to that a little bit more. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge says, I feel it my duty to inform you that the man holding this revival is an imposter. He holds no papers of divinity from any institution recognized or improvised. He is altogether devoid of the least qualification of the office he has usurped, and he has only committed to memory a few passages from the good book for the purpose of lending to his fraudulent sermons some faint flavor of piety he despises. In truth, the gentleman standing here before you posing as a minister of the Lord is not only totally illiterate, but is also wanted by the law in the states of Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Oh God, cried the Reverend, lies, lies. He began reading feverishly from his open Bible on a variety of charges, the most recent of which involved a child of 11. 11, we get the occult 11, right? We get the number of the occult. Yakin and Boaz, by the way, the twin pillars of Freemasonry, are specifically noted in this book. And what this signifies is, of course, 11 is the number of the occult. And the twin numbers 11 are supposed to symbolize the twin pillars of Yakin and Boaz. And what we see is the judge setting up these twin pillars in terms of his narrative, because the kid is going to walk into this portal, so to speak, into the illumination of the desert. And he's going to follow the judge, and he's the only one that survives in the gang up to the point of unification with the judge, which occurs at the end of the book. Yeah, 11 on Stranger Things. And yeah, JD's doing things tonight. You guys, all right, I can't get sidetracked by talking about Stranger Things, but I just watched episode 1 and I'm getting right back to it after this, you guys. But don't leave me here, folks. Stay with me, and you can watch it anytime on repeat. let's see. But also what we have here is that the judge is actually, he's accusing this minister of what he himself is doing. He's gaslighting the congregation, so to speak, in the revival tent. And he means to destroy any sort of light or innocence. And he, even though this minister may himself be a false prophet, this guy certainly is. Also, the creeper things that he just said apply specifically to the judge. There is him, cried the reverend, sobbing. This is him, the devil. Here he stands. This minister calls out the judge right from the beginning. Not 3 weeks before this, he was run out of Fort Smith, Arkansas for having Congress with a goat. There's your Baphomet imagery, right? Also, later on, the judge is described. He's sitting on a rock in the middle of the desert in the abyss. And one of the characters says that he swore he saw cloven hoof prints because the judge appears out of nowhere. He appears out of the void, sitting on this rock. Later on, he marks a meteor crossing the sky, a green meteor. Remember, we talked about the green light in Parzival and in The Great Gatsby. We talked this green light keeps coming up. And then later on, he confronts the actual Kaaba meteorite and lifts it over his head, like he is lifting creation in his demiurgical guise, I suppose. Somebody says, "Why damn eyes if I won't shoot the son of a bitch?" And a man rising at the far side of the tent and drawing a pistol from the boot, he leveled it and fired. Somebody in the tent shoots this minister. Later on, then the judge goes into a bar, orders a drink. And they says, "How do you know that man was a liar? How do you know he wasn't a real minister?" And the judge says, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "That judge, the one you just accused." And the judge says, "I never laid my eyes on the man before today, not even heard of him." He raised his glass and drank. There was a strange silence in the room. The men looked at the mud effigies. Finally, someone began to laugh, then another. Soon they were all laughing together, and someone bought the judge a drink. In other words, they're in communion with him there. And he has just committed a pure satanic accusation. He's the accuser. He gaslit the whole company, the whole revival tent, and this results in first blood in the book. He comes across the kid comes across this guy named Toadvine, and he kicks him in the jaw, and then Toadvine says, "I'm going to kill you." They fight in the mud. Kill, sobered the man waiting forward. And then he says, his hands were huge. On his forehead were burned the letters HT, and lower and almost between the eyes, the letter F. HTF. And these markings were splayed and garish as if the iron had been left too long. When he turned to look at the kid could see that he had no ears. So Toadvine had his ears docked. He's a slave to the judge and to sin, and he's branded on his forehead like in Revelation, right? And we'll see that the branding plays a part later on in this book, especially when they come across in the void of the desert. They're in this hellscape with volcanoes, and towards the end of the book, again, the judge makes his own. He makes his own gunpowder and explosive, like a Greek fire with saltpeter out of the volcanic ash. Speaking of volcanic ash, you want to hear something? You want to hear something spurgy, you guys? This is totally OCD. What is the longest word in English? Does anybody know it? The longest word in English is ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. No, sorry, pneumono-ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. The pneumono is important because it's the disease you get from inhaling the microscopic fragments of an exploded volcano. And certainly the characters in this book inhale the poisonous dust of this Vulcan volcano in the hellscape. Toadvine and the kid become friends. They actually don't kill each other. And Toadvine was running down the street, waving his fists above his head crazily and laughing. He looked like a great clay voodoo doll made animate, and the kid looked like another. Behind them, flames were licking at the top corner of the hotel, and clouds of dark smoke rose into the warm Texas morning. Because what happened is, when they got out of the Hooskow, Toadvine said, "Follow me," and they went upstairs in the whorehouse. And Toadvine shoots a guy, and then they burn the whorehouse down. Let's see. She stopped at the gate and watched him go. He didn't look back. A few men sat horseback watching the flames, and one of these was the judge. As the kid rode past, the judge turned and watched him. He turned the horse as if he'd have the animal watch too. And when the kid looked back, the judge smiled. Now, the judge doesn't appear for like another, I don't know, quarter of the book after this. But what's interesting is that the book isn't really about, the kid is, I guess, the protagonist, but none of them are innocent. They're all demons. The kid, like, there's like 100 pages where the kid is never even mentioned or described. But the brilliant thing about the book that McCarthy does is the speaker in the book, this third person omniscient narrator, it's so all encompassing that we're in this world. We are complete. It's visceral. It's electric. We're completely absorbed into the world of the novel. And even though the kid isn't described for like 100 pages, he's never even mentioned, barely mentioned. We never lose sight of the fact that he's there, and he's one of these outlanders, and that it's like we become ensconced into this narrative so that we feel like we know what the kid is doing at all times, even though he's not described doing things. Does that make sense? Which serves the purpose of what the judge does. The judge knows where everything is and what all of the events, past and present, that have happened within the world of the novel. And we also feel the presence of the judge always in the background, even for this like quarter of the novel where he's not even described. Page 16, this is chapter 2. Now come days of begging, days of theft, which is almost like an anti-biblical syntax here, right? Days of riding where there rode no soul save he. It's almost ecclesiastical, but in the negative. The night sky lies so spent with stars that there's scarcely space of black at all, and they fall at night in bitter arcs. And it is so that their numbers are no less. The bitter arcs is a nod to the blood meridian, right? The meridian is the arc of the sky. And this is continuously mentioned within the novel as like a demarcation line of where they are, right? There's the azimuth and the meridian, always sort of soaked in blood, like they're in some sort of Gnostic zodiac. He keeps off of the King's Road for fear of citizenry. That's almost an Oedipus Rex line, right? Or like in the Doors, right? The King's Highway. The sun that rises is the color of steel. Everything in the book is also steel and metal and the taste of burning metal. His mounted shadow falls for miles before him. His shadow is supposed to be like his double, right? Or like he's a shade wandering through hell. He wears on his head a hat he's made from leaves, and they have dried and cracked in the sun, and he looks like a raggedy man wandered from some garden where he used to frighten birds. There was also the reference to Celine, right? Celine and the Celine and the Journey to the End of the Night. Come evening, he tracks a spire of smoke rising oblique from among the low hills, and before dark he hails up at the doorway of an old anchorite, nested away in the sod like grounds cloth. solitary, half mad, his eyes red rimmed as if locked in their cages with hot wires. But a ponderable body for that. He watches wordless while the kid eased down stiffly from the mule. A rough wind was blowing and his rags flapped from him. Seen ye smoke, said the kid. Thought you might spare a man a sup of water. The old hermit scratched at his filthy hair and looked at the ground. The water was salty, sulfurous. He drank on. So here we have another one of the landmarks posted within the hellscape of this book, which is a journey through the arcana. We have a number of tarot, esoteric and occult tarot images, and here we come across the hermit archetype. We have a number of these in the book: the hanged man, the hermit, the hierophant, the fool, and these serve as sort of signposts along this quest. And then on page 19, he turned and rummaged among the hides and handed through the flames a small dark thing. The kid turned it in his hand. Some man's heart, dried and blackened. So this guy hands him an actual human heart. And here we have the symbolic, this is almost like a, we have this sort of sacrifice over the flames, this human heart that's handed to the kid, which he takes, right? Page 20, the old man swung his head back and forth. The way of the transgressor is hard. God made this world, but he didn't make it to suit everybody, did he? Lost ye way in the dark, says the hermit. The kid says, I can think of better places and better ways. Can you make it be? No, it's a mystery. A man's at odds to know his mind because his mind is aught he has to know it with. He can know his heart, but he don't want to, rightly so. Best not to look in there. It ain't the heart of a creature that is bound in the way that God has set for it. You can find meanness in the least of creatures, but when God made man, the devil was at his elbow. A creature that can do anything, make a machine, and a machine to make the machine. An evil that can run itself 1,000 years, no need to tend it. You believe that? I don't know. Believe that. When the old man's mess was warmed, he doled it out, and they ate in silence. Thunder was moving north, and before it long, it was a booming overhead and starting bits of rust and a thin trickle down the stovepipe. It came banging the tins together as if to fend away some dry gulch phantom out there in the dark, distant thunderheads. So this is almost Malthusian, right? Hold on, let's see what's coming in here. Oh, sweet. Thank you. Thank you, Countess. Shouts out to Countess Powers out there. Thank you so much for that awesome $10 donation. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much for supporting me. I really appreciate you. Oh, look at that. $5 from Steven. Thank you, Steven. Always supporting me. $5 on PayPal. Really, thank you so much, homie. Really appreciate you. Look, there's our homie, Kristen at Slowboy Whiteboard with a $5 donation on Cash App. Really, thank you so much, you guys. Really appreciate you being here with me and supporting me, even though I'm extra a little raspy today. And you guys, please make sure you go to Slowboy Whiteboard always and sub to her channel and check out her content because she has the most based content out there for sure. Let's see. Next part. Let's see. Okay, here we have the desecration of a church and the killing of a bartender on page 27. Again, I didn't bother, you guys. I didn't even bother with the sticky notes bought from the JD store of sticky notes this time because every single damn page of this book it gets a sticky note. I mean, there's nowhere to even have any sort of demarcation line where I want to go back to, because you can't take your eyes off of the words in this book for even a second. I mean, even when I'm reading excerpts, it's like you see how dense and packed and complex the language is. The kid crouched lightly with the bottles and fainted and then broke and then broke the right one over the man's head. Blood and liquor sprayed, and the man's knees buckled and his eyes rolled. The kid had already let go the bottleneck, and he pitched the second bottle into his right hand in a road agent's pack before it even reached the floor. And he backhanded the second bottle across the barman's skull and crammed the jagged remnant into the eye as it went down. A lot of one-eye symbolism in this, by the way. He woke in the nave of a ruinous church, blinking up at the vaulted ceiling and the tall, swagged walls with their faded frescoes. The floor of the church was deep in dried guano and the droppings of cattle and sheep. It was a bone carcass of some animal dead in the chancel. The way that the speaker describes the action so clearly and expertly and with dispassion is like, the point of it is later on when the judge says that essentially as above, so below is essentially what the judge says later, which is to say that there's no point in past or present or future. Everything is a sort of now, is a sort of eternal now. And that the only way to transcend their degraded world is through warfare. And that is the only way that these archons can sort of, or rather the one can unify with this demiurge, right, through Sophia. So that's the first desecrated church. The facade of the building bore an array of saints in their niches, and they had been shot up by American troops trying their rifles. The figures shorn of ears and noses and darkly mottled with lead marks oxidized upon the stone. And then you see how they desecrate it? And then the kid walks out into the river, and he wades into the river like some holy, wretched baptismal candidate. So there's this process of baptism, rebirth, regeneration, and resurrection that the kid goes through within the context of the book. And then he's come upon by these soldiers, and again with the religious imagery and language, it says, this guy says, "I was a sorrier sight even than when you are, and he come along and raised me up like Lazarus, set my feet in the path of righteousness. I done took to drinking and whoring until hell wouldn't have me. He seen something in me worth saving, and I see it in you. What do you say?" And then the squalid kingdom of mud, the bones of the little death bells tolled thinly. So they hear the therefore ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee, right? Because you could read this book as that these people are all dead wandering through hell. I don't think that's true, but it is certainly a hellscape. Kid lies about his age and gets into this paramilitary outfit. And then let's see. They talk about their reason for going and scalping and killing the Indians. And then on page 37, it says the captain was watching the kid. The kid looked uneasy. Hold on. Americans will be able to get to California without having to pass through our benighted sister republic, and our citizens will be protected at last from the notorious packs of cutthroats presently infesting the routes with which they are obliged to travel. So that's their reason for committing this genocide. They want to commit a sort of a safe passage for these Americans traveling east to west. And they end up making it to the sea. So they make it all the way west, young man, and go west, young man. Right. And however, when they get to the west, he finds the evening star, right? He finds this Satan judge figure, into which he is unified at the end of the book. But it's also sort of this is the idea of like sort of a quasi Phoenix program in 1849 America, where the government and corporations are partnering with the military and paramilitaries to commit atrocities on behalf of the power interests, right? He says, we're to be instruments of liberation in a dark and troubled land, and we will be the ones who will divide the spoils. I think you mean to make your mark in this world. Here we go. With his domain and principality. He says, one day, Mexico, that it can't help it, will fly a European flag, Monroe Doctrine or not, which speaks to the sphere of influence of these guys. It's also a Gnostic sphere, and this is under the Demiurge or the judge's influence. Let's see. On page 40, we have the mention of the new man altogether, the new man or the Ubermensch. And we have, let's see, 6-foot spheres, naked savages who with their painted skins and their whispered taste for human flesh seemed outrageous presences even in that fabled company. Of course, the ones with the taste for human flesh are the actual Glanton gang. It says, how many youths have come home cold and dead from just such nights and just such plans? The hell they will. Pray that they will. On page 43, they come across this Mennonite who's sort of an archetypal figure here along their journey in their Homeric Odyssey. It's Homeric because the kid is also there are obvious Iliad references within the book, because the killing and the burning and the degradation of the enemies resembles Achilles defeating Hector and degrading him by riding him around the gates of Troy, where Priam can witness it in the dust, and also the kid ends up being shot through the leg or through the ankle, like an Achilles figure. Page 43, the Mennonite watches the enshadowed dark before them as it is reflected to him in the mirror over the bar. Mirrors play a huge role in the symbolism of this novel. Every time a mirror is mentioned, we have a character who is trying to mirrors, mazes, and labyrinths to discover or to find his true self, but it's either only reflected back at him or, in a few instances, sort of towards the climax of the book, when the judge confronts Toadvine, Tobin, and the kid. They are at the bottom of this well in this hellscape pan of the desert, abyssal void zone. And they look down in the well, and the well reflects back up. You remember that scene in Westworld where the guy has that totally Gnostic speech? What's his name? James, the guy who owns Westworld. And he says, there were two of us. But it was only, you looked up and it was only the devil's face laughing back down at you, he says. That's the same imagery here. And obviously Westworld, I would say Westworld, the show, there are so many films and television shows that you can tell are influenced by this book. I mean, specifically Westworld, in terms of its tone. And one that kept coming to mind was 3:10 to Yuma. I really like that movie. You guys seen that movie, 3:10 to Yuma? The one with Christian Bale, whom we just discussed in the Lunar Park analysis that we just did, because Christian Bale's dad, David Bale, married a CIA, the feminist, Gloria Steinem. Right. Yeah, I like 3:10 to Yuma. I think it's a really good movie. And, there are no character. I mean, the overall gang, Russell Crowe's gang, sort of resembles the Glanton gang in a way, but of course they're 1/1,000,000th as vicious. But the way they discuss them in the book is sort of that. And remember that in 3:10 to Yuma, Russell Crowe does do something that seems specifically straight out of, I know it's a remake of the original, but it's something that seems specifically straight out of the Judge's book, so to speak, which is, remember whenever they come to rest, Russell Crowe, he's the man in black, and he's always copying, sketching birds and posting them in the trees. Now, the Judge puts them into his own book, but essentially he's not, he's just mimicking creation, right? Yes, Kristen, you're getting 322 years in the gulag, but don't worry, because we're all going to be in FEMA Zone 666 with you and AJ. So we're going to be having a good time there, folks. Right. Maybe you'll get sent to Appalachian acid rain FEMA district, and me and you and Jeff can all hang out together. And JD, he's in that region too. How these things end in confusion and curses and blood. The boy lay with his skull broken in a pool of blood, none knew by whom. A third came out to be with him in the courtyard. It was the Mennonite. A warm wind was blowing in the east, held a gray light. There is no such joy in the tavern as upon the road there too, said the Mennonite. He had been holding his hat in his hands, and now he set it upon his head and turned and went out the gate. Right? He went out through Yakin and Boaz. The kid rides a dead man's horse in the howling wilderness, and westward the horizon lay flat and true as a spirit level. So again, we have this equanimity between up and down, above and below in the book. I'm not saying that that's the truth. I'm saying that that is the worldview expressed within the book, right? The rifle the kid carried had been sawed down and rebored till it weighed very light indeed, and the mold for it was so small he had to patch the balls with buckskin. The descriptions in this book are amazing. It's so visceral. Here we have the Gnostic Meridian on page 46. Deeper run of color like blood seeping up in sanded reaches, flaring plain-wise, and where the earth drained up into the sky at the edge of creation. The top of the sun rose out of nothing like the head of a great red phallus until it cleared the unseen rim and sat squat and pulsing and malevolent behind them. The shadows of the smallest stones lay like pencil lines across the sand, and the shapes of the men in their mouths advanced elongate before them like strands of the night from which they'd ridden like tentacles to bind them to the darkness yet to come. They rode with their faces down, faceless under their hats, like an army asleep on the march. Now wolves had come to follow them, great pale lobos with yellow eyes that trotted neat of foot or squatted in the shimmering heel to watch them where they made their noon halt. Damn, the language is so intense. It's electric. It's otherworldly and visceral, right? This looks like the high road to hell to me, said somebody. It's incandescent. They're like a ghost army. Hell yes. Like it's like they're literally in hell, right? They moved on, and at page 48, they moved on, and the stars jostled and arced across the firmament and died beyond the ink-black mountains. They came to know the night skies well, western eyes that read more geometric constructions than those names given by the ancients. Tethered to the pole star, they rode the Dipper round, while Orion rose in the southwest like a great electric kite. The sand lay blue in the moonlight, and the iron tires of the wagons rolled among the shapes of the riders and gleaming hoops that veered and wheeled woundedly and vaguely navigational like slender astrolabes, and the polished shoes of the horses kept hasping up like a myriad of eyes winking across the desert floor. So you get how the sentences are elongating, they're meandering, they get longer and longer because the content and the form are mirroring each other, because that's what the characters are literally doing. They watched the storms out there so distant they could not be heard, the silent lightning flaring sheetwise, and the thin black spine of the mountain chain fluttering and sucked away again in the dark. They saw wild horses racing on the plain, pounding their shadows down the night and leaving in the moonlight a vaporous dust like the palest stain of their passing. It's so incredibly epic. And then somebody actually prays on page 50. He prayed, Almighty God, if it ain't too far out of the way of things in your eternal plan, do you reckon we could have a little rain down here? Pray it up, some called, and kneeling he cried out among the thunder and the wind, Lord, we are dried to jerky down here. Just a few drops for some old boys out here on the prairie and a long ways from home. But even the language of the prayer itself is almost Gnostic, like he's speaking to a distant creator God, right? Rather than God, the Trinity. Yes. Then they find a fool, a tarot fool archetype, a half-wit. They set forth in a crimson dawn where sky and earth closed in a razorous plain. A razorous plain, right? The neologisms in this, I don't know if razorous is a neologism, but it sounds almost Shakespearean in terms of its how he speaks. The speaker here speaks in a kind of primordial, archaic language, where words strike you on a spirit level, as he says in the book, rather than on a literal plane. And I think that there's something to be said. I mean, there are a couple of references in the book to Anglo-Saxon. He mentions the word Anglo-Saxon. He also mentions pandemonium by name, which is a straight up Miltonian, Paradise Lost reference, especially when we get the word adamantine reference. We, go back to my Paradise Lost analysis, and Satan lying in adamantine chains in the Stygian blackness, dark, so dark, the darkness was visible. Right. And the metaphysical language here, and the mythical, like Proto-Germanic Anglo-Saxon language, complete with caesuras, is reminiscent of a barbarian time. And I think McCarthy does that. He obviously does it purposefully, because go back to my Beowulf, and now we've done Beowulf as well, right? We keep talking about intertextuality and how all these works keep leading on one to another. But it's the closest thing that the speaker can relate to in terms of analogy, because imagine, I mean, what's incredible in this book that you forget really until you get into the crux of the book is that imagine a time where there is an actual, an undiscovered country where you come across an entire new landmass, right? And it's wilderness to these people, and they come across, and there are people there, and they are genociding, and they're slaughtering, they're raising the earth to make way for their new order, right? But imagine like living in a time where that's a thing, and you're watching this thinking, oh, what about space, man? Show me them damn aliens. Well, there's even a scene where, a pretty big, there's a momentous scene where one of the guys are sitting by the fire, and the judge is sitting half naked on top of a meteoric rock in the heat haze of the hellscape sweltering desert. And the guy says, is there life on Mars? And the judge says, no, there's no life on Mars, and no life anywhere else. It's just here. And he's right about that. But his explanation is slightly different than the one we're going to have. He says he essentially says there's no life anywhere else. There's just life here, and all life exists for his own dominion. It's almost like he's a prince of hell. He's almost like Paimon. JD makes a good point in his essay about how one of the people that he holds dominion over as his sort of allies are the money changers and usurers, on which he doesn't look with pleasure, but like he holds dominion over them. And he specifically says that he's going to be a suzerain of the earth, right? He's going to be a ruler of the earth, even when there are other rulers. We'll get to that part. Let's see. We get the Legion of Horrible, the Legion, right? Legion of Horribles. hundreds in number, half naked or clad in costumes attic or biblical or wardrobed out in a fever dream with the skins of animals and silk finery and pieces of uniforms still tracked with the blood of prior owners, coats of slain dragoons, frogged and braided cavalry jackets, one in a stovepipe hat. So we get this description of these wandering, like, ragtag people who are almost in a carnival. And the carnival is another one of the main themes of the book. We've got the Gnostic theme, the overriding Gnostic theme. Then we've got the carnival. We've got the Paradise Lost, hellscape. We've got the raising of the earth, almost a Roman, almost a sense of like the Romans, raising Carthage, right, salting the earth. We've got the carnival plays a major role in this. Because peace, Crispy, good. Thank you for stopping by, homeboy. I appreciate you. But the carnival plays a major role in this because the judge is he always like is attracted to these carnivals that appear, like these medicine shows, and it's like he appears in a fever dream, and he plays the fiddle like Nero fiddling while Rome burns, and of course the Antichrist imagery is not so subtle in this book, but it's like this dance macabre house of horrors nightmare alley that is supposed to represent the absurdity of their like braving the wilderness and the natural order of things within this universe. He's got to check in with Klowski. Nate. Let's see. Okay, page 56, we have a scalping. And he saw men lanced and caught up by the hair and scalped standing. And he saw the horses of war trample down the fallen. The little white-faced pony with one clouded eye leaned out of the murk and snapped at him like a dog was gone. They're wearing masks of dust, one-eye symbolism. Okay, here we go, page 56. Funhouse figures. There's the carnival. Some with nightmare faces painted on their breasts, riding down the unhorsed Saxons. There's the Saxon imagery, ripping off limbs, heads, gutting the strange white torsos, and holding up great handfuls of viscera, genitals. Some of the savages up with gore. They might have rolled in it like dogs, and some who fell upon the dying and sodomized them with loud cries to their fellows. And now the horses of the dead came pounding out of the smoke and dust, encircled with flapping leather and wild manes and eyes, whited with fear like the eyes of the blind, and some were and stumbling and vomiting blood as they wheeled across the killing ground. Tonsured to the bone, now lay like maimed and naked monks in the blood-slaked dust, and everywhere the dying groaned and gibbered, and horses lay screaming. Hey, having a nice Saturday, you guys? Hellscape, right? Page 58, chapter 5. With darkness, one soul rose wondrously from among the dead and stole away in the moonlight. So here we get this sort of resurrection imagery of the kid escaping this massacre that they've just gone through. The paramilitary irregular group that he joined has been massacred, and he makes his way out through the illumination of the moonlight. Right. And and let's see. Damn if they ain't about a caution to the Christians, somebody says. And he meets this guy named Sproul. Page 60. I wrote satanic filth, hellscape, violation, and degradation. Okay, you ready for this message, you guys? If it gets too much, I'm obviously gonna, Lealgo doesn't like some of these words, but we're offering commentary, okay, in this analysis. So he says, they followed and trampled ground left by the war party in the afternoon. They came upon a mule that had failed and been lanced and left dead. And then they came upon another. The way narrowed through rocks, and by they came to a bush that was hung with dead Babies. So this is the tree of death. And trees are important symbolisms, are important symbols in this book. Whenever there's a tree, first of all, the kid was found naked under a tree, like it's an Edenic image, and then he's clothed by the group of paramilitaries. and then he has this weird baptism. Then he had this weird resurrection right into the illuminated moonlight. But later, but whenever they come across trees, it's like they're making their way back and they see the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the trees will either signify death, degradation, depravity, or just utter hell murder. And this one, they see this tree that's been adorned with dead, BABIES. They stop side by side, reeling in the heat. These small. Okay, I'm not going to read this passage because it's this one's too much. It's awful. It's absolutely macabre. Page 63. Eyes cooked in their sockets. They see. Let's see. There was a niche in the mud wall with figures of saints dressed in dolls' clothes. The rude wooden faces brightly painted. Here we get. This is Santeria. They come across a bruja. The rude wooden faces brightly painted, illustrations cut from an old journal and pasted to the wall, a small picture of a queen, Tara, right? A gypsy card that was the Four of Cups. The Four of Cups plays an important role in this. Long buttresses of light fell from the high windows in the western wall. There were no pews in the church, and the stone floor was heaped with scalped and naked and partly eaten bodies of some 40 souls who barricaded themselves in the house of God against the heathen. The altars had been hauled down and the tabernacle looted. So just more degradation and defilement. There's dead. The dead are everywhere. Dark monocline where turrets stood like basalt prophets and they passed by the side of the road like wooden crosses. Propped in cairns of stone where travelers had met with death. And then they come to an immense lake. It's like the lake of fire. So do you see why this is like Dante's Inferno here, right? Yes. Christopher says, McCarthy rebels in language, visceral. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate you, homie. Yeah. His language is like the language of some otherworldly, time out of mind, archaic prophet. It's Homeric, right? I should have just said it's Homeric. Let's see, page 68. Here's like a little parable by this man. When the lambs is lost in the mountain, he said, they is cry. Sometime come the mother, sometime the wolf. Let's see. There's a bloodbath. Would not bloodied hand. Let's see, page 69. Would not hear a howl of such outrage as to stitch a caesura in the pulse beat of the world. There's your caesura. Remember, the caesura is the line break in the midst of a line of verse in the Anglo-Saxon epic, right? There because the Anglo-Saxon verse has no rhyme scheme. Instead, it works on with a meter that is guided by the caesura. The caesura, it's a caesura again because Caesar's life, right? Caesar's life is cut short in the middle. And so we have a caesura is like a space in the middle of a line of Anglo-Saxon verse. And that we've often, in every poetic analysis that we've done, we've talked about how a line of verse represents a meter or a measure of the world, right? So when you have a line break, it's like you're going off into a new world, so to speak. That's why a line of Elizabethan verse is, iambic pentameter, 10 syllables, unstressed, stressed pattern, because it's supposed to represent, and that in itself is almost Gnostic, right? Because it's unstressed, stressed, peaks and valleys, right? Valleys and peaks, ebbs and flows, up and down. And so what he's saying here is that the caesura is like the break in the middle of the line of life of the world. Page 73, we get a demonic carnival. And this part's this is like, these people are like worshiping, they're like Santeria. And then this like actual carnival comes out of the desert, and it's like this line of like juggler. It's like an old medicine show, but it's grotesque, and they're, it's this dance of death. And then somebody has a jar, and in the jar is the head of the captain who saved the kid, or at least saved him, at least got it, recruited him into his paramilitary group. I don't know if he saved him. Somebody says that's the worst thing I ever seen in my life. Well, thank you for speaking that for us. Yes. They looked like God's profoundest peons. Their talk, when they talked, was of witches or worse, and always they sought to parcel from the darkness some voice or cry from among the cries that was no right beast. La gente dice que el coyote es un brujo. Muchas veces el brujo es un coyote. They go past a cathedral where there's vultures, and again, it's another desecrated church. Let's see. Do you get why throughout the book, all the people traveling east to west are called pilgrims? They're called pilgrims because, it resembles the line of pilgrims going to the Holy Land, except they're going to the west. They're going the opposite. So they're sort of anti-pilgrims. They're going towards the sea in the west, and they have to be protected by this group of demons. They come across I pray daily for the Lord to watch over them. Thank you. Someone prays. Let's see. They come across another carnival of people, and the cart has an eye painted on the side, all-seeing eye, all lightly shimmering in the heat. These life forms like wonders much reduced. They come across the Comanche, and the Comanche are absolutely terrifying. Page 82. Some Americans went in there and scalped what was left of them and tried to sell the scalps in Durango. He squinted at the kid in the candlelight. What do you reckon we get for old Brass Teeth's teeth? Says Toadvine. And then Toadvine actually does take his teeth and then wears them as a necklace. They saw patched Argonauts. So we get Jason and the Argonauts here. We get a Greek mythic sense of narrative. From the States, driving mules through the streets on their way south through the mountains, gold seekers, itinerant degenerates bleeding westward like some heliotropic plague. They nodded or spoke to the prisoners and dropped tobacco and coins in the street beside them. The coins, the money changers. They saw black-eyed young girls with painted faces smoking little cigars, going arm in arm and eyeing them brazenly. All the children in the book are described as black-eyed. They all, they're like the conspiracy of the black-eyed children, right? Theoretical. But that's because they're in this degraded world where innocence is violated. It's horrible. Eyeing them brazenly, one point about the subtlety of McCarthy as a writer here, and how his language is like a prose poem, is that all the words, I mean, it's not verse because it's not written in lines, but it's almost like that seems that seems paradoxical, right? A prose poem. It seems oxymoronic. However, poetry, we talked about with Coleridge, the best words in the best order, and every word in this matters. So just a little bit on the subtlety of the language here. He drops the word gold seekers, right? And then he says brazenly. So we get brazen, we get brass, gold. Later on, we get a mention of the gold human teeth, and riders wearing scapulars or necklaces of dried and blackened human ears. And we also get the bearded and barbarous, clad in the skins of animals. So the alliteration, the assonance, and the unity of diction subtly brings the reader to this point where we're absolutely entranced by what we're reading. We know that form and content are completely synthesized in this, and are producing this terrifying meaning. Somebody just dropped somebody out there, one of my homies out there just dropped something. Let's pick it up real quick. Speaking of gold, right, you guys? Who that was? Page 83, while that comes up. Let's see. Here comes our homeboy Jeff with a fat $25 Cash App donation. He says, for real, can you freestyle as Larry Nichols or Pastor Manning? I think, will we get in trouble if we do Pastor Manning? And Larry Sinclair had a fabulous love affair in the back of a Cadillac Escalade. Listen, my name's Larry Nichols. Hi, I'm calling in. Long-time listener, first-time caller. This is Larry Nichols. I'm calling in because I knew Cormac McCarthy. I was friends with Cormac McCarthy. You, sir, you ain't no Cormac McCarthy. You know, first time I met Cormac McCarthy was in L.A. We were with Hillary, and we were doing some weird stuff with pumpkins. They asked that man who was the most dangerous man on earth, and he said, Larry Nichols. That should go to tell you something. How dare you? How dare you? Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you, homeboy. Okay, let's see. Yeah, you guys, if you want me to freestyle, freestyle with a bad impression of a pretty deep cut, esoteric, conspiracy character, then drop me those Cash Apps, you guys, and I'll do bad impressions for you. Let's see. Page 83, Glanton. Dangerous, filthy, brutal, the whole, like a visitation from some heathen land where they and others like them fed on human flesh. Foremost among them, outsized and childlike, with his naked face, rode the judge. The enormous dome of his head, when he bared it, was blinding white and perfectly circumscribed about so that it looked to have been painted. He and the reeking horde of rabble with him passed on through the stunned streets and hove up before the governor's palace, where their leader, a small black-haired man, clapped for entrance by kicking at the oaken doors with his boot. The kid was watching the judge. When the judge's eyes fell upon him, he took the cigar from between his teeth and smiled, or he seemed to smile. And then he sees Glanton, Toadvine. He's got a contract with the governor. They're to pay him $100 a head for scalps and $1,000 for Gomez's head. I told him that there was 3 of us. Gentlemen, we're getting out of this shithole. So don't let on like you ain't no seasoned Indian killer, because I claimed we was the 3 of the best. So now these guys are like imprisoned, Glanton, Tobin, and the kid, and they're going to get out of jail and out of trouble in this town, because in comes the Glanton gang, and they're going to say, hey, you guys doing some really awful shit? Sign us up. We can do it too. And so they join this gang, essentially. One thing about the gang is that's really noticeable is that they are compatriots. They're sort of bound together in this covenant of blood, as they call it. And the judge even makes a remark later on about how, covenants and rituals involve blood. And he demands, this blood sacrifice everywhere he goes, pretty much. But they're bound together in this sort of it's a demonic covenant of blood and murder. And yet, they're not friends with each other, right? The kid never makes friends. The kid is this scorned kid, and he's not even afraid of the judge. I mean, to give him credit, he's the only guy in the book who's not afraid of the judge. Of course, he should be more cautious, but he's not afraid of him. But but they what was I saying? I lost my train of thought there. I was still thinking about Lurie. Oh yeah, the gang. They're not friends, and in fact, whenever they, whenever anybody gets injured, sometimes Glanton will just shoot the guy in the head if he's injured too bad. They're not like, leave no man behind. They're not like that at all. In fact, any sign of weakness among them is seen as compromising their unit. So these guys are hard. They have no feelings. They have no dignity. Certainly no dignity and no virtue. Let's see. So here's this is about essentially the power structure in this part. And the power structure is such that, we really get the pyramidal power structure because we continuously see the one eye symbolism within the book, and the dome of the judge's head is obviously supposed to be like a simulacrum of the dome of the world, over which he holds dominion. And he's huge and bulbous, but he represents in a way, the cap of the pyramid, because even though he's playing amongst men and he sort of plays this, Beelzebub to the Satan of Glanton, he is the one who survived. He's the survivor. We know that he's this otherworldly figure. He's not of this world. And beneath him is the political power and the corporate power. And then we get the managerial class. The corporate political power is where the gang interacts and receives their contracts straight from the highest, political authority. And then the managerial class, we get people like the doctor and such that are managing, like the ferry, etc. And then we get the common people. But it just shows you that, even in 1849, we get this interaction, this sort of symbiotic relationship in terms of this oligarchical power structure. They do an arms deal, and they buy a bunch of guns from the military. They test them by killing a bunch of animals. They kill. The guns are high powered technology, and Glanton leveled a huge. This part is pretty rough. Glanton leveled a huge pistol in the one hand and thumb back the hammer. The explosion in that dead silence was enormous. He shoots a cat, and it simply disappeared. There was no blood. It just vanished. Glanton turned the pistol and shot a small goat. Then he shoots the bell tower and swings toward the house and rang the bell in its mud tower above the roof, a solemn tolling that hung on in its emptiness after the echoes of the gunfire had died away. They were contracted for war. They talk about the children of Ham and the lost tribes of Israelites through which the judge does business. Go see Jay's essay analysis again in the video description for an excellent and succinct analysis especially of the esoteric elements of this text and the Gnostic quest. I'm just diving into the text here. Let's see. Says on page 89, in possession of the fact, let's see, the judge serves as a lawyer, and he says, exacted by the formal agenda of an absolute destiny. Words are things. The words he is in possession of, he cannot be deprived of. Their authority transcends his ignorance of their meaning. Page 90, they're described as outriders, and the sun is white hot, and the moon is a pale replica. The moon is a pale replica of the sun, white hot. So we get this dualistic light and dark, checkerboard imagery here. Toadvine wears a necklace of human ears that he wears, and it looked like a string of dried figs. Page 92, there's a midnight meridian and dread pilgrims. And then we get the itinerant magicians dressed in fools' costumes with stars and half moons embroidered on. And the once gaudy colors were faded and pale from the dust of the road. And they looked a set of right wanderfolk cast on the evil terrain. And Glanton and the judge talked to these guys, to these. Okay, here we get the Sophia archetype here, page 95. Mexican soldiers had slaughtered an encampment of Apaches some years gone, women and children, the bones and skulls scattered among the bench for half a mile, and the tiny limbs and toothless paper skulls of, I'm not going to say that, like the ossature of small apes at their place of murder, and old remnants of weathered basketry and broken pots among the gravel. They rode on. The canvas was scrawled with arcana. At the company watch, as the company watched, the four of them, all clutched to the snapping cloth, were towed mutely from sight beyond the reach of the firelight and into the howling desert like supplicants at the skirts of some wild and irate goddess. And then Glanton gets his fortune told by a blind seer, a tarot gypsy. And it bore the picture of a fool and harlequin and a cat. Page 97, the judge sat upwind from the fire, naked to the waist, himself like some great pale deity. The fire fled down the wind. The ex-priest shook his head. Idolatry, idolatry. And then the judge says, I think she means to say that in your fortune lie our fortunes all. Okay, so the Bruja tells the judge that the fortunes of all of the Glanton gang lie with the judge. They lie with the judge and they lie with the judge. Everything they're lied to. Here we get the Four of Cups, page 98 again. And there's a Gnostic fortune. And then on page 99, the woman sat like the blind interlocutrix between Boaz and Jachin, inscribed upon the one card in the juggler's deck that it would not see come to light. True pillars and true card, false prophetess for all. She began to chant. The judge was laughing silently. The juggler, kneeling before him, watched with a strange intensity. Get the hell away from me, said the kid. The juggler's eyes sought out Glanton. He sat unmoved. The juggler looked at the old woman where she sat apart, facing the dark, lightly tottering, racing the night in her rags. So, what did I write here? Jachin and Boaz, Masonic twin pillars leading to the wasteland wilderness of illumination for the Demiurge, Judge Holden. We also, it's like she's a false prophetess, Whore of Babylon character. Then we get, she reads another fortune and it's inverted. Let's see. The judge is like a great ponderous jinn, stepped through the fire and the flames, delivered him up as if he were in some way native to their elements. Some maelstrom out there in the void, some vortex in that waste, opposite to which man's transit and his reckonings alike lay abrogate. The juggler in his burrow trotted out to the head of the column and fell in with Glanton, and they rode on together, and they were so riding in the afternoon when the company entered the town of Janos. Page 101, sloughing into a soft decay, the advent of the riders brooded by scurvy curs that howled woundedly and slank among the crumbling walls. Native to their element is the occult and archetypal Demiurge figure. Okay. Oh, and then they move on, and then Glanton scalps the woman. He took a skinning knife from his belt and stepped to where the old woman lay and took up her hair and twisted it about his wrist and passed the blade of the knife about her skull and ripped away the scalp. Jeez. It's pretty light reading today, huh, guys? Okay, page 105 is pure Paradise Lost. They paused without the cantina and pooled their coins, and Toadvine pushed aside the dried cowhide that hung for a door, and they entered a place where all the darkness and without definition. Mixky. Whoa. He made a gesture toward the world beyond, where all the land lay under darkness and all a great stained altar stone. Is how he thinks of the world. You kill the barbarous, they cannot hide from you, but there's another caballero, and I think that no man hides from him. I was a soldier. It's like a dream, because it is like a dream. All right, page 110 and 111. We get chaos and war. All right, this one. All right, yeah, this passage is pretty intense. So I'm trying to think of a Kenneth Copeland impression. Go on, do it. How does he say? Go on, do it. Go on, do it. That's what Kenneth Copeland says. Whoa. Shouts out to Lil KC, right? The best hype man in the business. Page 110 of Blood Meridian. Again, we're doing Cormac McCarthy. To everybody who's here with us this nice Sunday afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well. Can't wait to watch JD's Stranger Things analysis coming up. Shouts out to all our homies out there. Shouts out to Mikhail. You guys go to, you're watching this especially later, go to Tech Noir Graphics with an X at Instagram and check out his memes. Check out all our homies. Check out Jerry at Exposing Powerful Lies live streams. Our base good homie Jerry out there slanging ice in the heat. Page 110. The sun to the west lay in a holocaust where there rose a steady column of small desert bats, and to the north, along the trembling perimeter of the world, dusk was blowing down the void like the smoke of distant armies. The crumbling butcher paper mountains lay in sharp shadow fold under the long blue dusk, and in the middle distance, the glazed bed of a dry lake lay shimmering like the mare Imbrium, and the herds of deer were moving north in the last of the twilight, harried over the plain by wolves who were themselves the color of the desert floor. He passed, and so passed all into the problematical destruction of darkness and the providence of night. Here, beyond men's judgments, all covenants were brittle. About that fire were men whose eyes gave back the light like coals socketed hot in their skulls, and men whose eyes did not, but the black man's eyes stood as corridors for the ferrying through of naked and unrectified night, from what of it lay behind to what was yet to come. Any man in this company can sit where it suits him, he said, and he's got one eye half closed. So here we go into the full maelstrom of the abyssal void. You know, these guys, they sit around with their eyes glowing like coals, and they constantly reach into the fire. I know that they used to do this in the Old West, right? Reach into the fire, with bare hands and pull a coal out to light their pipe. But the way they do this, combined with their sort of dark pilgrimage, their eyes glowing red with fire, their utterly sick deeds, and the fact that they're going out into this blood meridian described as a HOLO cost, right? Because it's a great burning swirling cauldron of the world into which they find themselves, like demons in a hellscape plane of the sixth circle of the inferno, right? Again, we get the unity of diction and language, the language here, right, with the alliteration and assonance serving to unify the variety and various elements of the sentence structure to give the impression of this unified, devilry. Page 112. One of the Gemini twins, and they're complete. They're not only Gemini twins who are members of this gang. They're both named Jackson, but they are also They're also, Gnostic. They're Gnostic opposites, and one of them kills the other one. He jumps out across the flames and decapitates the other one with his Bowie knife. And the head rolled to the left and came to rest at the ex-priest's feet, where it lay with eyes aghast. Columnar arches of blood. He was sat as before us, save headless, drenched in blood, like a grotto in the flames where his life had gone. Blanton rose. The men moved away. No one spoke. When they set out in the dawn, the headless man was sitting like a murdered anchorite, discalced in ashes and sark. Someone had taken his gun, but the boots stood where he put them. The company rode on. They had not gone forth 1 hour upon that plain before they'd ridden upon by Apaches. So they leave the guy sitting like some headless disciple of Satan. That actually is an image that occurs specifically in in Hereditary. Remember in Hereditary, when the kid is possessed by Paimon and he ascends up into the pyramid of the treehouse with no legs, right? It's got no legs. It's got no stilts. It's sort of hovering in the trees, and they go up there, and all the fucking sick, witch people are bowing to this idol, and including the headless mother. You remember that? Pages, let's see, page 117. We get Inferno imagery. This is Dantean. For out on the desert to the north, dust spouts rose, wobbling and augured the earth, and some said they'd heard of pilgrims borne aloft like dervishes in those mindless coils, to be dropped broken and bleeding upon the desert again, and there perhaps to watch the thing that had destroyed them lurch onward like some drunken jinn. Outward of that whirlwind, no voice spoke, and the pilgrim lying in the broken bones may cry out, and in his anguish he may rage, but rage at what? And if the dried and blackened shell of him is found among the sands by travelers, to come yet to who can discover the engine of his ruin. So we get again this idea of the Gnostic shell, right, and base matter. I'm going to skip ahead to some of the more. Every page is packed with almost like this is some sort of Gnostic Bible, right? Or at least allegory. But I'm going to skip to some of the more overt passages here, you guys, so we don't keep going on with the languages. If you haven't read the book, and I'm not saying you should have read the book. I mean, this is a great book. I can't think of a better, meaning more powerful, more symbolic tome, especially American, than Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. I mean, this book is unlike any book I've ever read. Again, we get all of the allusions to the epics and to Shakespeare and Paradise Lost and the Iliad and the Odyssey and so forth, and Moby Dick, which we've covered, but it's totally McCarthy. It's unlike anything else, and it's also purely American. This is one of the most American books I've ever read, and it really takes precedent. I mean, it's so complete in its statement. So I'm just going to try to go with some of the more overt passages here, but there are so many, so I'm just going to try and pick out a few. So let's talk about the judge. Mainly, let's talk about the judge. This Mick says this book reminds me of The Shining in a way. Well, The Shining does have the journey by the family going, into Colorado, and they do cross the Colorado River. It's a major point in this book. Remember, listen, now oh, great. Now he's talking about cannibals. Remember, Danny asked about about the Donner Party. Where'd you hear about the Donner Party? Oh, great. Do you hear that? Now he's watching TV. Right? Donner! Donner! Sorry, Ellie. But yeah, I mean, the ghost-like imagery and the fact that, you know, the Shining begins with the demon hovering over the car, right? And listen to the soundtrack, right? Listen to the music, that the synthesizer soundtrack by what's her name? What's her name that did the you guys? She did the soundtrack to The Shining. Wendy Carlos. Listen to the Wendy Carlos score. The deep bellowing synths at the beginning of that movie, combined with the imagery that, you know, we see the car and we see the mirror, right? The point of view is from above, like we're watching a demon floating over the car, right, as they're going up to the overlook, and we see the mirror, as above so below. We see the mirrored imagery of the river as they're snaking their way along, and they're talking about cannibalism, right, setting the tone for the whole thing. I mean, this book, some of those elements certainly tie in, right? I mean, overtly, the cannibalism plays a major role in this, right? Page 124. Someone had reported the judge naked atop the walls, immense and pale in the revelations of lightning, striding the perimeter up there and declaiming in the old epic mode. The judge violates innocence in this, which is, I'm not going to read those parts, but this is a reversal of innocence here by this Demiurge or Lucifer character. I'm not going to read those because they're too much. And page 126, like some ignis fatuus, belated upon the road behind them, which all could see and of which none spoke, for this will to deceive that is in things luminous may manifest itself likewise in retrospect, and so by sleight of some fixed part of a journey already accomplished may also post men to fraudulent destinies, the flare of the dry lightning to the north. So the judge is declaiming upon this wall, right, about when he talks about destiny, he's simply talking about everyone coming under his domain. Page 129, they start talking about the judge. Okay, so this is a specific passage about the judge, about Judge Holden. One of the guys says, he speaks Dutch, said the ex-priest. Dutch? Aye, the kid looked at the ex-priest. He bent to his mending. He reads poetry out loud, man. I can't tell the difference between real life and the movies, man. You're going to put me in Waterworld? And a voice. Look at me. Wrong. I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across floors of silent seas. I mean, look at me. I'm not a kind man, a wise man. Look at me. Wrong. You. Dennis Hopper. Page 129. The judge says, no, said Tobin, the gifts of the Almighty are weighed and parceled out in a scale peculiar to himself. It's no fair accountant, and I don't doubt but what he'd be the first to admit it, and you put the query to him boldface. Who? The Almighty. Oh, there's your Apocalypse Now reference, like Almighty, calling PBR Street Gang. No, but he's talking about this is the purely theological statement of the Gnostic worldview of this book, right? That great hairless thing. You wouldn't think to look at him that he could outdance the devil himself. Now, would you? God the man is a dancer. You'll not take that away from him. And fiddle. He's the greatest fiddler I ever heard, and that's an end on it. The greatest. He can cut a trail, shoot a rifle, ride a horse, track a deer. He's been all over the world. Him and the governor, they sat up till breakfast, and it was Paris this and London that in 5 languages. You'd have give something to have heard him. The governor's a learned man himself, but the judge, he's an uncommon love for the common man, and godly wisdom resides in the least of things, so that it may well be that the voice of the Almighty speaks most profoundly in such beings as lives in silence themselves. Speaking about the kid, right? God speaks in the least of creatures. And of course, this Demiurge is trying to be the most. He is the judge is the most of creatures in this book, right? Every man in the company claims to have encountered that sooty-souled rascal in some other place. Yeah, because he's old Nick, right? He's old Nick. He's like in The Devil and Tom Walker by Washington Irving. In fact, on the next page, 131, we get a character named Irving who pops up. And then here we get at the top of 131, this is Milton's Satan on the rock in hell and pandemonium across the abyss. There he's set on a rock in the middle of the greatest desert you'd ever want to be. We were 38 men when we left Chihuahua City, and we were 14 when the judge found us, mortally whipped on the run. The judge, give the devil his due. Then about the meridian of that day, we would come upon the judge on his rock there in the wilderness by his single self. And there was no rock, just the one. So there's this plate of desert, right? Which is fragmented by a sort of this Promethean lightning. And there's the taste of metal in the air, and there's the smell of sulfur, and there's the red meridian, and there's no water, and there's the abyssal cracks in the desert floor, and there's one rock in the whole hellscape. And the judge, this 7-foot tall albino hairless moonchild Leviathan, Falstaffian creature Demiurge, is sitting on this meteorite. And that's where they find him. That's what he says. That's how they came upon the judge. And he speaks all languages. And also, again, he fiddles because he's clearly a Henobarbus. He's clearly a Nero Antichrist figure who is playing the absurd dance macabre while all about him burns the world in this book, in the world of this book. In Arcadia Ego, he didn't have a canteen. You couldn't tell where he come from. I don't know to this day. They have a secret commerce, some terrible covenant, because he's got a covenant with Glanton. He's obviously, it's like Glanton is Faust, and the judge is like, Mephistopheles actually there with him the whole time. Right. Let's see. Plato's cave appears. Page 134. The next day on the far side of the mountain, we encountered the two lads that had deserted us hanging upside down in a tree. They'd been skinned, and I can tell you he does very, very little for a man's appearance because they've been inverted. Everything the judge does is an inversion or a mockery or a lie. Page 136, on the edge of a vast Malpais, and his honor takes up a position on some lava rocks. It was like a sermon, but it was no such sermon as any man of us had ever heard before. Beyond the Malpais was a volcanic peak, and in the sunrise it was many colors, and there was birds crossing down the wind, and the wind was flapping the judge's old Benjamin about him, and he pointed to that stark and solitary mountain and delivered himself of an oration, to what end I know not then or now, and he concluded with the telling us that our mother the earth, as he said, was round like an egg and contained all good things within her. Then he turned and led the horse he'd been riding across that terrain of black and glassy slag, treacherous to man and beast alike, and us behind him like the disciples of a new faith. The Malpais, it was a maze. For where for aught any man knows lies the locality of hell. Well, they're in hell. For the earth is a globe in the void. In truth, there's no up nor down to it. And there's men in the company besides myself seen little cloven hoof prints in the stone, clever as little dough in her going. But what little dough ever trod melted rock? They traversed that fiery vomit for to salvage back those souls that had been by misadventure been spewed up from their damnation onto the outer shelves of the world, and sometimes put them little hooflet markings in the lava flow, for I seen them there myself. One of them is at this fire tonight, and I saw them lead down horses away over the slag lands like a doomed man. He was, again, about the judge. He was the first to the rim of the cone for all the size of him, and he stood gazing about him like he'd come for the view. Then he sat down and he begun to scale at the rock with his knife. A wheel of brimstone all about him, the rim of the cauldron, bright yellow and shining here and there with the little flakes of silica, but most pure flowers of sulfur. I didn't know, but we'd be required to bleed into it like Freemasons, but it was not so. So they're being hunted by. So at this point, this guy's telling a story about how after they came across, yes, Brando silently wiping his bald head with a sponge was greater than most other modern performances. I totally agree. Are you an assassin? Do you live near the river? What river, sir? The Ohio River. I remember when I was a boy, my father took us down that river, and we came across a plantation. It must have been a gardenia plantation, right? A gardenia plantation. Yeah, sent by grocery clerks. And I remember like I was shot with a diamond bullet right through my forehead, right? Yeah, the judge is Kurtz in that way. I mean, he's massive and like he's massive and Promethean and like a demigod, and he speaks all these languages, and he reads poetry out loud, and he's a poet warrior in the classical sense, right? Except that he is actually the Demiurge, right? And at this part, they're being hunted by a group of Comanche, I think, who are going to utterly annihilate them, and they sort of run out of gunpowder. So the judge climbs up onto this volcanic rock, and he like kneads the earth together with his hands, and he makes a sort of a Greek fire, saltpeter, and they all stand around and they urinate into the ground, and they're like writhing in this filth, this utter filth of this volcanic, hell volcano. And the judge whips up this gunpowder out of it. He like he's a sorcerer. He makes a potion out of it. And on this sort of, this is like, one of the stops on their Masonic journey into, total degradation. And the judges, we watch the savages, we watch the judges' foul matrix drying on the rocks. Foul matrix. What a term, man. Gosh, this guy can write. Right? He can write. No one spoke, and the cloud just cut the corner from the sun and passed on, and there was no shadow fell upon us. And the judge took up his ledger and went on with his entries before, because he's always writing in his book of death, right? And they make this sacrament, this sick sacrament, down the maw of that thing, he says, and Glanton never questioned. He went down the pitch of the inner rim to where lay the terminus of that terrible flue, and he held his piece out over it, and he pointed it straight down and cocked the hammer and fired, and you wouldn't hear a sound like it in a long day's ride. The judge also, at one point, when they're being attacked by the Indians later, I think the Yuma, the judge fends them off by, they go in, and the judge, who has captured the jerk, the Nightmare Alley jerk, who is this beast man, and the judge, he's sort of an avatar of the judge in a way, because the judge essentially says that he is the beast. He is the great beast at the climax of the book. But they go into this, they bust into a tent, and the judge is in there with the jerk and with this GIRL, in this utter, it's just fucking sick. And what's been happening. And they go in, and the judge is holding a howitzer in one hand, and he wards off an entire tribe with his, like, with the mechanized power of explosive that he's capable of. And let's see, at this part, the Indians come up and then they basically blow up this like volcano. He said the pistol stuck in his belt at the back, and he drew them one in each hand, and he is at either handed as a spider. He can write in both hands. Oh, this is the judge. He's either handed as a spider. He can write with both hands at a time, and I've seen him do it. And he commenced to kill Indians. He says, God, it was a butchery. They were on brimstone. And then the guy said, the kid looked at Tobin. What's he a judge of? He said, what's he a judge of? What's he a judge of? Tobin glanced across the fire. Ah, lad, he said, hush now. The man will hear you. He's ears like a fox. Well, he's the judge of men in this world, in this hell world, right? Let's see. Okay, I'm going to skip to. God, there's so much. I'm going to skip. Okay, here's I'm going to read about the meridians of chaos and old night on page 169. Yeah, you guys, if you're liking this, please make sure you all that do me a favor and go ahead and like the stream down there. Smash that like button. I need those likes to get the algo going so we can blow it up. Also, please don't hesitate to share this stream. Share it wherever you can. Share it on your Facebooks or your Twitter, or your Instagram, or word of mouth. share my channel. Trying to get up to 1,000 so we get those super chats going. And I really appreciate everybody's here who's here with me right now, and everybody who's watching later. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here with me, and hope you're enjoying my my raspy voice here going over this Cormac McCarthy book, Blood. I'm just going to do a few more passages here because we could spend all day and night on this, and we don't want to. So let's just get through some of them here. The abyssal imagery on page 169. When the kid returned to his own blanket, the ex-priest leaned to him and hissed in his ear, "Fool," he said, "God will not love you forever." The kid turned to look at him. "Don't you know he'd have took you with him? He'd have took you, boy, like a bride to the altar." And that's actually what happens at the end. The judge takes the kid's life, but he also has sort of a implied unification with him, taking him as his hell slave concubine, kind of like we discussed what Nero did, except Nero was the bride, and I forget his name, but he was the bridegroom. But in this, the judge is certainly the groom. Onto the altar of pain. He called forth quivering out of the abyss. In the smoking dawn, the party, riding ragged and bloody with their baled peltries, looked less like victors than the harried after guard of some ruined army retreating across the meridians of chaos and old night, the horses stumbling, the men tottering asleep in the saddles. The judge, they slaughter like 100 Apaches. They ride into this tribe and they slaughter everyone. The judge takes a BOY and leads him away. And then later you find out that, of course, he has killed him because he's an evil son of a bitch. And let's see. Page 176. Here's a little bit on the power structure. Patriotic toasts were drunk, the governor's aides raising their glasses to Washington and Franklin, and the Americans responding with yet more of their own country's heroes, ignorant alike of diplomacy and any name at all from the pantheon of the sister republic. And this is the power. I wrote power structure, occult partnership between the top of the pyramid politicians, the murderers, and business and corporations. On page 176, we get, let's see, the governor described as the sorcerer's apprentice who makes a devil covenant with these guys and brings them in, but then loses control of them after they basically the gang comes back and they sell their scalps to the governor, who pays them handsomely and then gives them this feast. And they proceed to pretty much annihilate the town. He loses control of them. And then we get into some like blasphemous passages. Let's see. Page. They kill this entire tribe. They kill another tribe and they decapitate the leader. And they put his head on a pike like in Macbeth. But then, and they do a bunch of other stuff that I can't even describe here. And then the judge says, that's not Gomez, because they're looking for this guy Gomez, who's the head of the guys whose scalps they're hunting. But he says, well, can't we act like it is? Can't we fake it? And the judge says, no, we're going to kill everybody. Deployed upon that plane, they moved in a constant elision, ordained agents of the actual dividing out the world which they encountered, and leaving what had been and what would never be alike extinguished on the ground behind them. Spectre horsemen, pale with dust, anonymous in the crenellated heat. Above all else, they appeared wholly adventure, primal, provisional, devoid of order, like Gorgons shambling the brutal wastes of Gondwana land in a time before nomenclature was and each was all. Arcane maps. And yet the judge went among them with assurance, tracing out the very ones which he required. What he had done, and while there yet was light, he returned to a certain ledge and sat a while and studied again the work there. Then he rose, and with a piece of broken chert, he scalpeled away one of the designs, leaving no trace of it, only a raw place on the stone where it had been. Then he put up his book and returned to the camp. Page 181 is this: such destinies were prefigured in the very rock for those with eyes to read. They rode in silence. Them sons of bitches ain't bothering nobody, Tonevine said. The Van Diemen Lander looked at him. He looked at the livid letters tattooed on his forehead and at the lank, greasy hair that hung from his earless skull. He looked at the necklace of gold teeth at his chest, and they rode on. Before they could quite believe in the reality of that dusty pandemoniac pounding down upon them. So Toadvine has a problem with them killing all these innocent people. And the reason that the guy looked at him and looked at the marks on his head is because he said, you're one of them. You're one of us. You've been doing it too, right? You may have a conscience, but you're not doing anything about it. And they proceed to genocide these guys. Toadvine ends up hanged with this other guy, Brown. Is it Toadvine hanged or Tobin? Anyway, they're all dead. The kid actually, at one point, you think he's got salvation because he gets baptized. Later on, after the carnage and the destruction, he gets baptized by a priest while he's in prison. And he seems to, changed, been redeemed until he comes, and maybe he is, until he comes face to face with the Demiurge judge who orders his destruction. But even then, maybe he's martyred, right? I don't know. But that's one of the only glimpses of hope and salvation in the book. The rest is a total hellscape. And what does that mean? Well, I suppose it's supposed to be, it's supposed to signify the ordo ab chaos, right? They're making order out of chaos in terms of the destruction of the West so that they can, have this sort of rebirth of civilization. In terms of the worldview of the book, right? Not actually true. In terms of it's not true that we don't believe that, but this is what they're doing in the book. Those riders seemed journeyed from a legendary world, and they left behind a strange tincture, like an after image on the eye, and the air they disturbed was altered and electric. I mean, right there, that pretty much signifies the book, right? On page 95, adamantine is mentioned. Remember, we talked about adamantine, the Satan and the adamantine chains in hell. They were the wardens of some dim sect set forth to proselytize among the very beasts of the land, burned to final darkness, and the rain hissed in the blind nightland. Signs and wonders in the heavens themselves, so dark was the ground of their origins. So, anyone reading this book and going, no, it's just a literal history in fictionalized form of the conquest of the West, right? Well, then why is the language so metaphysical, right? And also, why is the book of fiction and not a historical document? Let's see. Four of Cups, the Judge on the Rocks, Human Parts and Cannibals. Okay, page 198, the judge dances and fiddles like Nero. The judge had spied the musician, and he called to him and tossed a coin that clinked on the stones. Struck up an air that was old among the mountain banks of Spain 200 years before. The judge stepped into the sunlit doorway and executed upon the stones a series of steps with a strange precision. He and the fiddler seemed alien minstrels met by chance in this medieval town. So there again, we get stepping between the twin pillars, going through the door of perception into, illumination, dancing and fiddling, like making a mockery, like Nero, while destruction burns around them. Let's see, a barefooted brotherhood clad in black marched in the rear, bearing scepters of weeds. The judge sat alone in the canteen. Okay, so this another carnival of death walks past them, and the judge sits in the darkness. And the judge does coin tricks. Again, see Jay's essay analysis in the video description at Jay's Analysis. Go to jaysanalysis.com and look up Blood Meridian. Look up his essay on Blood Meridian, right? A succinct essay analysis on the Gnostic elements within this text, especially the emphasis on coinage. There's a priest who baptizes wounded Americans and then stood back while they were shot through the head. There's an abyss. One of the guys sinks into an abyss. Okay, page 207. This is one of the seminal moments in the book, and this is the judge and the judge on creation. Okay, and this is one of the Demiurge elements. Okay, so the judge is watching Toadvine as he made notations in his ledger, holding the book toward the fire of the light. And he asked him what his purpose in all this was. So the judge is sitting there copying creation into his book of death in the firelight, in the waste of the desert. And he's sitting there half naked like some Satan, Buddha, bulbous, Dune Baron. And he says on page 207, whatever exists, he said, whatever in creation exists without my knowledge exists without my consent. He looked about at the dark forest in which they were bivouacked. He nodded toward the specimens he'd collected. These anonymous creatures, he said, may seem little or nothing in the world. Yet the smallest crumb can devour us. Any smallest thing beneath yon rock out of men's knowing. Only when the existence of each last entity is routed out before him will he be properly suzerain of the earth. What's a suzerain? A keeper or overlord. Why not say keeper then? Because he is a special kind of keeper. A suzerain rules even where there are other rulers. His authority countermands local judgments. Toadvine spat. The judge placed his hands on the ground. He looked at his inquisitor. This is my claim, he said. And yet everywhere upon it are pockets of autonomous life. Autonomous. In order for it to be mine, nothing must be permitted to occur upon it save my dispensation. The judge tilted his great head. The man who believes that the secrets of the world are forever hidden lives in mystery and heat and fear. Superstition will drag him down. The rain will erode the deeds of his life. But the man who sets himself the task of of singling out the thread of order from the tapestry will by the decision alone have taken charge of the world, and it is only by such taking charge that he will effect a way to dictate the terms of his own fate. I don't see what this has to do with catching birds. The freedom of birds is an insult to me. I'd have them all in zoos. That would be a hell of a zoo. The judge smiled. Yes, he said, even so. The judge, atop a great boulder overlooking the trail, watched them go. So do you get it? Do you get how he's the demiurge? Right? On page, let's see. Let's skip forward. They essentially go into Dante's ninth circle, into the frozen hellscape. So cold that it's hot. Page 237, we get the meteor. Okay, this part's a lot, you guys. Okay, so just hang on with me here. Page 237. They found the lost. Okay, they find the lost scouts. The scouts are like these two guys, the Delawares, and they are just demons. They're just demon figures, killing everything in their path. They commit absolute atrocities, infanticide, cannibalism. They do all sorts of stuff. And on page 237, they found the lost scouts hanging downward from the limbs of a fire-blacked Palo Verde tree. They were skewered through the cords of their heels with sharpened shuttles of green wood, and they hung gray and naked above the dead ashes of the coals where they'd been roasted until their heads had charred, the brains bubbled in the skulls, and steam sang from their nose holes. Their tongues were drawn out and held with sharpened sticks thrust through them, and they had been docked of their ears, and their torsos were sliced open with flints until the entrails hung down in their chests. So, yeah, again, we get the length of the sentences, right? Gives us this it's almost like an epic incantation. I was going to mention in the last passage, the way that McCarthy does his dialogue is ingenious too, because there are no there are no quotation marks. The dialogue is fluid with the narrative, as if we are in the world completely, and we don't even need to stop for punctuation. We're completely in this contour of the narrative. We also there are no quotation marks because there's no need to mark where one character speaks and another listens, because the characters are all of the same mind. In fact, I'm not saying everyone in the book is alike in that respect. I'm saying that to the judge, everyone is the same. There's no difference in things. He just wants dominion over all. And he even specifically says, like, the things that were past and the things in the future don't matter to him or to humanity itself, which indicates that the differences amongst individuals don't matter. So why mark where there are quotation marks or not? He says, they rode through the night. They rode that night through the mission of San Xavier del Bac, the church, solemn and stark in the starlight. Not a dog barked. The clusters of Papago huts seemed without tenant. The air was cold and clear, and the country there and beyond lay in a darkness unclaimed by so much as an owl. A pale green meteor came up the valley floor behind them and passed overhead and vanished silently in the void. So the green meteor is like, we've discussed the green light and the green light of Lucifer. Also the green of envy, because of the money aspect in this, right? The money changers, the ferryman, the judge constantly with his coin, right? His coin is almost a totem. It's totemistic of his dominion. These two guys have been impaled through the tongues, because I said their tongues impaled because their evil deeds will only be spoken of in this narrative. They've been silenced. Their deeds have been silenced. and again, the judge says that their deeds don't matter. There's no, he gives a, later on, I'm going to get to it shortly. He gives another oration on the pointless, on his idea of the pointlessness of morality. And so to him, there's everything is the same, good and bad, right? Let's see. Archaic syntax I wrote. They encounter these Indians, and Glanton, the leader of the gang, Glanton, they come upon these Indians, and Glanton's horse bites the other horse. So it's a sort of a, they're just in hell. And then the horse ends up with one eye. Glanton is able to talk to animals. He talks to his horse. He tames a wild dog. The dog trails them. And at one point, there's a description of Glanton riding his horse with the dog walking underneath. And it's like a chimera, right? The imagery is of a chimera. And the dog it forms like a sort of a Cerberus, right? It's like the dog has been guarding the gates of hell, but now he's just walking with the devil in the hellscape. Yeah, on page 243, they come upon the Nightmare Alley jerk. Let's see. Okay. There's a scene where on page 249, they get to this place, and the judge reached and took hold of the man's head in his hands and began to explore its contours. The judge had his entire head in his grip like an immense and dangerous faith healer. Remember the very first scene in the movie, right? We talked about the judge going into the faith healer revival tent, right, and gaslighting the place, and then having the guy killed. The recruits at the end of the bench sat watching with their jaws down. The judge narrowed one eye at the man and studied him, and then reached and gripped him again, holding him by the forehead while he prodded along the back of his skull with the ball of his thumb. Just admiring the shape of your skull. Right? Remember in Fear and Loathing? But the judge, like, there's a few scenes where the judge is 7 feet tall. So everybody comes up to his waist, basically, in the book. And he, like, there are scenes where, like, he'll grab a guy by the head and just lift him up, like, with one arm. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay, so page 250 is where he Nero fiddles. He talks to the governor and the lieutenant of this band of soldiers. He cited cases civil and martial. He quoted Koch and Blackstone, Anaximander, and Thales. Basically, he can with his silver tongue, right? He can talk to anybody. The judge. Okay, then they find this meteorite, and several men pushed forward to feel the iron and rock to where it stood, nor did the judges lose this opportunity to ventilate himself upon the ferric nature of heavenly bodies and their powers and claims. The judge sees that great slag wandered for what millennia from what unreckonable corner of the universe, and he raised it overhead and stood tottering and then lunged forward. He cleared the mark by a foot and shared with no one the species piled on the saddle blanket at the farrier's feet, for not even Glanton had been willing to underwrite his third trial. His third trial, like he's some Satan saint, right? He's pure demon, and he basically lifts up this meteorite over his head, and he throws it because they attempted to do it, and then he, that's just a sign of his dominion. See. Glanton sees portents in the flame. Page 254. I'm going to read this because it's like that Gnostic zodiac again. That night, Glanton stared long into the embers of the fire. All about him, his men were sleeping, but much was changed. So many gone, defected, or dead. The Delawares all slain. He watched the fire, and if he saw portents there, it was much the same to him, and he would live to look upon the western sea, and he was equal to whatever might follow, for he was complete at every hour. Whether his history should run concomitant with men and nations, whether it should cease. He long forsworn all weighing of consequence and allowing, as he did, that men's destinies are given, yet he usurped to contain within him all that he would ever be in the world, and all that the world would be to him, and be his charter written in the earthstone itself. He claimed agency and said so, and he drive the remorseless sun onto its final endarkment, as if he'd ordered it all ages since, before there were paths anywhere, before there were men or suns to go upon them. Across from him sat the vast abhorrence of the judge. The idiot in his cage had been drawn close to the fire, and he watched it tirelessly. When Glanton raised his head, he saw the kid across the fire from him, squatting in the blanket, watching the judge. So you get that was the Gnostic, thesis of the book right there, right? They rode on in the darkness, and the moon-blanched waste lay before them cold and pale, and the moon sat in a ring overhead, and in that ring lay a mock moon and its own cold gray and knocker seas. For each fire is all fires, the first fire and the last ever to be. By and by, the judge rose and moved away on some obscure mission, and after a while, someone asked the ex-priest if it were true that at one time there had been two moons in the sky, and the ex-priest eyed the false moon above them and said that it may well have been so. But certainly the wise high God, in his dismay at the proliferation of lunacy on this earth, must have wetted a thumb and leaned down out of the abyss and pinched it hissing into extinction. So, I mean, you remember the image of, have you ever seen the William Blake engraving of the geometric Freemasonic, illuminate, confirm, creator God leaning down and setting the sun and the moon in motion? Have you seen that? And this is like the moon and the false moon. First of all, the moon is reflects the sun, the light, right? And then the false moon, the moon of illumination into darkness, though, right? Light into darkness, is emblematic of the sort of Gnostic hierarchy within this text. Yeah. And they're saying that essentially that matter is base, and that what's here is, an illusion, right? It's like Blake says, he says, what does William Blake say in Proverbs from Hell? He says, when the doors of perception are cleansed, things will appear as they truly are, infinite, right? In other words, perception, and then what does Rimbaud say in Illuminations? He says, although I live in the subconscious, our pale reason hides the infinite from us. So in other words, it's like there's a veil, like the veil of base matter and creation separates you from the true creation through which you need to unite with the Demiurge, right? In terms of the Gnostic quest elements of the text. He says, the judge says, this is the seminal speech in the book, by the way. The question was then put as to whether there were on Mars or other planets in the void, men or creatures like them. And at this, the judge, who had returned to the fire and stood half naked and sweating, spoke and said that there were not, and that there were no men anywhere in the universe save those upon the earth. All listened as he spoke, those who had turned to watch him and those who would not. The truth about the world, he said, is that anything is possible. Have you not seen it all from birth and thereby bled it of its strangeness? It would appear to you for what it is, which is what we just said from Rimbaud and Blake. A hat trick in a medicine show. That's the carnival that's occurred throughout. A fevered dream, fevered because they've been in this heat of the mirage haze desert. A trance bepopulate with chimeras having their analog nor precedent. An itinerant carnival, a migratory tent show. Whose ultimate destination after many a pitch and many a mudded field is unspeakable and calamitous beyond reckoning. The universe is so narrow a thing, and the order within it is not constrained by any latitude in its conception to repeat what exists in one part or in any other part. Even in this world, more things exist without our knowledge than with it, and the order in creation which you see is that which you have put there, like a string in a maze, so that you shall not lose your way. For existence has its own order, and that no man's mind can compass. That mind itself being a fact, among others. The compass, the Blake geometric Freemasonic compass. And also the maze, the labyrinthine maze of their true self in their Masonic worldview. I mean, their Gnostic, well, same thing, worldview. And also we get Hamlet allusions here, right? What is this quintessence of dust? There are more things on heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophies, Horatio, right? Let's see, page 257, we get Ahab. We get sort of a Ahab, even though he is the Leviathan. I mean, he is the white whale, right? But he is the sort of Leviathan speaking as if he's speaking to Ahab and countermanding his own speech, right? He says, it says, the judge smiled. He placed the palms of his hands upon his chest and breathed the night air, and he stepped closer and squatted and held up one hand. He turned that hand, and there was a gold coin between his fingers. Where is the coin, Davy? I'll notify you where to put the coin. The judge swung his hand, and the coin winked overhead in the firelight. It must have been fastened to some subtle lead, for it circled the fire and returned to the judge, and he caught it in his hand and smiled. The arc of circling bodies is determined by the length of their tether, said the judge. Moons, coins, men. His hands moved as if he were pulling something from one fist in a series of elongations. Watch the coin, Davy, he said. He flung it, and it cut an arc through the firelight and was gone in the darkness beyond. They watched the night where it had vanished, and they watched the judge, and they're watching some the one and some the other. They were a common witness, like they're sort of anti-disciples, right? The coin, Davy, the coin, whispered the judge. He sat erect and raised his hand and smiled. The coin, remember Ahab nailing the coin to the mast? The coin returned back out of the night and crossed the fire with a faint high droning, and the judge's raised hand was empty, and then it held the coin. A cunning old malabarista. And he said himself as he put the coin away, what all men knew, that there are coins and false coins. Coins and false coins. And the coin itself has a heads and a tails. It's double-sided, right? And the face on the coin is also a false face. It itself is an idolized image, right? Says with their, let's see, as if in those, here we go, sentence fragment again, fragments at psyche, as if in the transit of those riders were a thing so profoundly terrible as to register even to the uttermost granulation of reality. In the neuter austerity of that terrain, all phenomena were bequeathed a strange equality, and no one thing, nor spider, nor stone, nor blade of grass could put forth claim to precedence. It's all equal under the gaze of this demiurge, right? Let's see. Then they come to another camp, and they're talking, and the subject was war. The good book says that he that lives by the sword shall perish by the sword, said the man. The judge smiled, his face shining with grease. What right man would have it any other way, he said. The good book does indeed count war an evil, said Irving. Irving, because the devil and Daniel Webster. Is it devil and Daniel Webster or devil and Tom Walker? Maybe I'm conflating the two. Let's see. It makes no difference what men think of war, said the judge. War endures. As well ask men what they think of stone. War was always here. As what would war, stone, and words. Right? Remember, he said words are things. Before man was, war waited for him. The ultimate trade awaiting its ultimate practitioner. That is the way it was and will be. That way and not some other way. Also war, because they were just talking about Mars, right? And now it's like they're on the campus of Mars. They're on the field of Mars here. Notice also that where there is Mars, there is Athena, there is Sophia. War is your one of the guys says, my trade, certainly. What is my trade? War. War is your trade, is it not? And it ain't yours. Mine too, very much so. What about all them notebooks and bones and stuff? All other trades are contained in that of war, says the judge. The judge smiled. Men are born for games, nothing else. Every child knows that play is nobler than work. The creation of defeat and the pride of victory are in themselves sufficient state because they inhere in the worth of the principles and define them. But trial of chance or trial of worth, all games aspire to the condition of war, for here that which is wagered swallows up game, player all. Who has not heard such a tale? A turn of the card, the whole universe for such a player has labored, clanking to this moment, which will tell if he is to die at that man's hand or that man at his. What more certain validation of a man's worth could there be? This enhancement of the game to its ultimate state admits no argument concerning the notion of fate. The selection of one man over another is preference absolute and irrevocable, and it is a dull man indeed who could reckon so profound a decision without agency or significance either one. In such games as have for their stake the annihilation of the defeated, the decisions are quite clear. The man holding the particular arrangement of cards in his hand is thereby removed from existence. This is the nature of war, whose stake is at once the game and the authority and the justification. It's a game of nations, the grand chessboard. Seen so, war is the truest form of divination. It is the testing of one's will and the will of another within that larger will, which, because it binds them, is therefore forced to select. War is the ultimate game because war is at last a forcing of the unity of existence. War is God, he says. That's it. That summarizes, I mean, that's the crux of the book, right? That's the significance of the book. And it's Hitlerian, isn't it? It's satanic. Of course, if what he says is true, then he should annihilate himself. But he's the demiurge. Man's vanity approached the infinite in capacity, but his knowledge remains imperfect. And however much he comes to value his judgments, ultimately he must submit them before a higher court. Right? That's Gnosticism. That is it right there. Okay, I'm going to skip now to... So what happens is, again, the gang, they usurp this doctor who is in control of this ferry, ripping people off. Then he pretty much goes mad. They take this Nightmare Alley jerk. They put him in a cage. Then he escapes. The women like let him out, and he escapes and goes into the water. And then the judge pulls him out by his head and sort of baptizes him back into insanity, death, and degradation. Keeps him as a gimp. And then the rest of the troop gets slaughtered by these Indians, including Glanton, who is he is desecrated himself. And then Toadvine and Tobin, the ex-priest, defrocked priest, and the kid escape, and then they come across the judge in this wilderness desert. Of course, also the judge and the jerk remind me of Aleister Crowley and Victor Neuberg in the desert, right? Taking morphine, cocaine, and peyote and doing unspeakable acts and Goetia rituals, where he is then alighted to, illuminated in death to write the book of the law. Comes in Horus and crosses the abyss of Choronzon. And that makes me think of the judge and the jerk themselves doing essentially the same thing in the desert. Let's see. And then let's see. I'm going to skip to the end of the book here. And where the judge confronts the kid who is, let's see, he says on page 318, the judge smiled. No, he said, it was never me. But why lurk there in the shadows? The kid stood against so the kid is now in jail, and the judge shows up because the kid has escaped from the judge, but then he's almost dead, and he's in this bone wasteland, valley of ashes. Right? You see my T.S. Eliot Wasteland stream. We did the first 2 parts of the Wasteland. We got to do the other 3 parts, and then and also we did the Great Gatsby. See my Great Gatsby stream, Valley of Ashes, right? And then the judge shows up in the jail. The kid is in darkness, and the judge shows up in his finery, and he says, the kid still gets hardly more than a shadow himself. Don't you know that I'd have loved you like a son, says the judge. The kid stood with his back to the wall. I ain't afraid of you. The judge smiled. He spoke softly into the dim mud cubicle. You came forward, he said, to take part in a working, in a Crowley working, right? Their whole quest has been a giant, Goetia working. But you were a witness against yourself. You sat in judgment on your own deeds. You put your own allowances before the judgments of history, and you broke with the body of which you were pledged apart and poisoned in it all its enterprise. Hear me, man. I spoke in the desert for you and you only, and you turned a deaf ear to me. If war is not holy, man is nothing but antic clay. Well, man is clay, right? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, right? But for it was required of no man to give more than he possessed, nor was any man's share compared to another's. Only each was called upon to empty out his heart into the common, and one did not. Can you tell me who that one was? It was you, whispered the kid. You were the one. It was never me, said the judge. Listen to me. Don't you think Glanton was a fool? Don't you know he'd have killed you? And then he departs. And the kid is released 2 days later. A Spanish priest had come to baptize him and had flung water at him through the bars like a priest casting out spirits. Not like casting out spirits. He was casting out a spirit. Page 322. Hopefully, right? Page 322, we get the Gnostic egg and the atavistic egg. Page 322, illuminate, confirm. In that sleep and in sleep to follow, the judge did. So the kid he's still got an arrow through his leg that he got during the Indian attack. He's like, he is like Achilles, right? In the city of Troy. He gets a surgery, and they repair him, and they give him ether during the surgery. And in that sleep and in the sleep to follow, the judge did visit. Who would come other? A great shambling mutant, silent and serene. Whatever his antecedents, he was something wholly other than their sum. Nor was there a system by which to divide him back into his origins, for he would not go. When the kid had a chance to kill the judge, the ex-priest Tobin told him, kill him. Do it now. And the kid can't, and he says, you got to kill him now because you'll never be able to confront him. And the kid says, I can confront him face to face. And he says, you can't. And when he says, why can't he? The priest never answers, but we know why. Whoever would seek out his history through what unraveling of loins and ledger books must stand at last darkened and dumb at the shore of a void without terminus or origin. And whatever science he might bring to bear upon the dusty primal matter blowing down out of the millennia will discover no trace of any ultimate atavistic egg by which to reckon his commencing. In the white and empty room, he stood in his bespoken suit with his hat in his hand, and he peered down with his small and lashless pig's eyes, wherein this child, just 16 years on earth, could read whole bodies of decisions not accountable to the courts of men. And he saw his own name, which nowhere else could he have ciphered out at all, logged into the records as a thing already accomplished, a traveler known in jurisdictions existing only in the claims of certain pairs or in old dated maps. Then we get the passage about the false moneyer and the gravers and the Burns, an image that will render his residual specie current in the markets where men barter. Of this, the judge, and the night does not end. I recently read Faulkner was influenced by Dostoevsky. Yeah. Go down to Oxford, Mississippi. Go to Faulkner's home at Roanoke, right? And also Faulkner taught at UVA up here in Appalachian. And also go and check out, if you're watching this later, go and check out my Dostoevsky stream that I did with Tristan on Tristan's channel at Primal Edge Health, where we covered The Underground Man. And also I recently did Solzhenitsyn. What did I do? Solzhenitsyn. What was it? One Day. We did Solzhenitsyn's One Day recently. If you're watching this later, make sure you check that out. And also, yeah, please don't forget, you can support me through the links in the description or the channel, or that my beautiful, wonderful mod homies out there are dropping. Ellie, Natesky, Jatsky, Jerry, all my friends. Support me in Cash App. Or any of the other two ones. Cash App, of course, you can leave a message, and I appreciate that. Thank you for supporting me, you guys. And please support me so we can keep doing. I mean, we're going to, like I always say, we're going to keep doing this anyway. I love doing this, but definitely helps me out. And also, I got to get some books, you guys. Got to get some new books. I want to do Don DeLeo's White Noise, which I've read, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. But I can't find my copy of it. So, yeah, drop me some fat PayPals, Cash Apps, and Venmo so I can go buy them books, y'all. Appreciate you. Let's see. On the morning of the 11th again, I rose up, the 11th, all rose up still in darkness and turned out to witness a public hanging. Toadvine and Brown are hanged. The kid carries a Bible with him on page 325, and then crosses a lake of fire, described as a lake of fire. He comes across a witch, this is another tarot arcana signpost along this Gnostic journey. He comes across a witch in a Plato's cave, and touched her arm. She moved slightly, her whole body light and rigid. She weighed nothing. She was just a dried shell, and she'd been dead in that place for years. I guess she ascended, bro. Right? I guess she was a star seed and she ascended. No. She descended. Let's see. He comes across, the years pass, and he's like 55 years old. The kid's now 55. Doing analysis on Finnegan's Wake. Oh, that'd be a tough one. That might take a few years. Harold Bloom said that, he said this for a lot of works, but specifically Finnegan's Wake. He said you could study Finnegan's Wake for years and never do a proper analysis of it. So I don't know. We maybe we'll do a simpler James Joyce. Maybe we should do Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, because we could talk about that just in terms of literary structure, because that'd be a good one to do. We could talk about The Dead. Araby is a good James Joyce short story that we could do. But I'm not sure. Definitely, I'll probably avoid Ulysses. But yes, thank you for the suggestions. And if you want to leave me a suggestion for something else to do, leave it here in the chat, or leave it down below in the comments after the stream. I really appreciate y'all. I've had some really good suggestions, and I still need to get to The Giver. Somebody suggested doing Lois Lowry's The Giver a while back. And I'm actually, I thought that was a pretty good suggestion, just because it's a dystopian work that we could cover. Why not? Right. So I think we'll do that. Drop me some fat PayPal so I can get a copy of The Giver, you guys. I had a copy of it somewhere, and again, I can't find the books. I can't find are my prose fiction books. So I need to get a new copy of that. Let's see. We're at the end here. They're in a bar, and the kid goes, now 55-year-old man goes into the bar, and there's a bear dancing, and somebody shoots the bear, and the bear is obviously supposed to be sort of a representative of the natural order. And the judge The judge confronts, he sees the kid across the yellow light. Remember, we've also talked about the yellow light and the yellow eyes being this symbol of you. Oh, my stomach growling. I got to get them SpaghettiOs, you guys. Page 340. Do you believe it's all over, son? He turned. The judge was standing at the bar, looking down at him. He smiled. He removed his hat. The great pale dome of his skull shone like an enormous phosphorescent egg in the lamplight. The Gnostic egg. The last of the true. The last of the true. I'd say they're all gone under now, saving me and thee. Would you not? Saving me and thee. His language becomes archaic and almost archaic, Shakespearean, or almost biblical, right? Like they are the last two of these, anti-disciples or whatever. And some are not yet born who shall have cause to curse man's soul, said the judge. That's a misquote of Henry V. Purposeful misquote. Drink up, he said, drink up. This night thy soul may be required of thee. Oh, boy. The judge watched him. Was it always your idea, he said, that if you did not speak, you would not be recognized? You seen me, said the kid. The judge ignored this. I recognized you when I first saw you, and yet you were a disappointment to me then and now. Even so, at the last, I find you here with me. Disappointment because he hasn't transcended, right? He hasn't transcended his mortal coil into the realm of Gnostic illumination. I never come here hunting you. The judge watched him. He began to point out various men in the room and to ask if these men were here for a good time or if indeed they knew why they were here at all. He says, this is an orchestration for an event, for a dance, in fact. The participants will be apprised of their roles in the proper time. For now, it is enough that they have arrived. As the dance is the thing with which we are concerned and contains complete within itself of its own arrangement and history and finale, there is no necessity that the dancers contain these things within themselves as well. In any event, the history of all is not the history of each, nor indeed the sum of these histories, and none here can finally comprehend the reason for his presence, for he has no way of knowing even in what the event consists. In fact, were he to know, he might well absent himself, and you can see that cannot be any part of the plan, if plan there be. He smiled, his great teeth shone, he drank. An event, a ceremony, the orchestration thereof. The overture contains certain marks of decisiveness. It includes the slaying of a large bear, the evening's progress. The bear also is the great bear of the zodiac. We've seen this zodiac, astrological zodiac. And it's in the title, right? It's inherent in the title, really. The evening's progress will not appear strange or unusual, even to those who question the rightness of the events so ordered. A ceremony, then. One could well argue that there are not categories of no ceremony, but only ceremonies of greater or lesser degree. And deferring to this argument, we will say that this is a ceremony of a certain magnitude, perhaps more commonly called a ritual. A ritual includes the letting of blood. Rituals which fail in this requirement are mock rituals. Here, every man knows the false at once. Never doubt it. Because this is a death ritual, and their life has been a sort of ritual, the events of the book. The game is left with its solitary participant, a solitary game without opponent, where only the rules are at hazard, because the judge knows he is no opponent. She transcends the kid, right? Don't look away. We are not speaking in mysteries. You of all men are no stranger to that feeling, the emptiness and the despair. Is not blood the tempering agent in the mortar which bonds? The mortar which bonds, because remember the judge did the ritual of the gunpowder in the mortar and pestle of the volcano earlier in the book. What do you think death is, man? Of whom do we speak when we speak of a man who was and is not? Are these blind riddles, or are they not some part of every man's jurisdiction? What is death if not an agency? And whom does he intend toward? Look at me. He says it's an intended architecture that he is little more than a walking hovel, hardly fit to house the human spirit at all. House the human spirit. Again, we get this Gnostic base matter. Can he say, such a man, that there is no malign thing said against him, that there is no power and no force and no cause? Can he believe that the wreckage of it calls for largeness of heart, but it is also ultimately empty? It is hard, it is barren. Its very nature is stone. He poured the tumbler full. The tumbler is like the cup, right? The arcana, the tarot cup. We have dancing nightly, and this night is no exception. The straight and the winding way are one. And now that you are here, what do the years count since last we two met together? The straight and the winding are one, right? God makes the crooked road straight. He's saying they are all one. Because he says they're the same to him, right? This is just one more place. Okay, here we go. This is talking about the characters and why the judge thinks of the characters in the book the way that he does. Cash that Red Bull, y'all. Where is yesterday? Where is Glanton and Brown? Where is the priest? He leaned closer. Where is Shelby, whom you left to the mercies of Elias in the desert? And where is Tate, whom you abandoned in the mountains? He names all the people that the kid took a liking to, or even if it was an unconscious liking, or that he had mercy on. And remember that when the judge was talking about you broke this bond, this covenant with us, it's because he means he broke his satanic blood covenant, right? By having mercy. He says, let's see, where are the ladies and all the fair and tender ladies with whom you danced at the governor's ball when you were a hero anointed with the blood of the enemies of the republic you'd elected to defend? Power structure. I tell you this, as war becomes dishonored and its nobility called into question, those honorable men who recognize the sanctity of blood will become excluded from the dance, which is the warrior's right. And thereby will the dance become a false dance, and the dancers false dancers. And yet there will be one there always who is a true dancer. And can you guess who that might be? You ain't nothing, says the kid. You speak truer than you know. But I will tell you, only that man who has offered up himself entire to the blood of war, who has been to the floor of the pit and seen horror in the round and learned at last that it speaks to his inmost heart, only that man can dance. The judge set the bottle on the bar. Hear me, man, he said. There is room on the stage for one beast and one alone. All others are destined for a night that is eternal and without name. One by one, they will step down into the darkness before the footlamps. Bears that dance, bears that don't. Because he is the beast. He's the great beast. And then the judge goes outside, and then the kid, it says, this is the end of the book, you guys. Stars were falling across the sky, myriad and random, speeding along brief vectors. Excuse me. From their origins in night to their destinies in dust and nothingness. Within the hall, the fiddle squealed and the dancers shuffled and stomped. In the street, men were calling for the little girl whose bear was dead, for she was lost. They went among the darkened lots with lanterns and torches, calling out to her. The guy walks towards the Jakes. The judge was seated upon the closet. He was naked, and he rose up smiling and gathered him in his arms against his immense and terrible flesh and shot the wooden bar latch home behind him. So here we get the Demiurge absorbing and uniting with the kid, absorbing his innocence and defiling it, and then ultimately ending him. He kills the kid. Somebody walks in, they say, good God Almighty. Yes, good God Almighty. There's an evil fog. Two people are plucking their strings. Last page. Towering over them all is the judge, and he is naked, dancing, his small feet lively and quick, and now in double time, and bowing to the ladies, huge and pale and hairless like an enormous infant moonchild. He never sleeps, he says. He says he'll never die. He wafts his hat in the lunar dome of his skull, passes palely under the lamps, and he swings about and takes possession of one of the fiddles, and he pirouettes and makes a pass, two passes, dancing, fiddling at once. This is a dance macabre. His feet are light and nimble. He never sleeps. He says he will never die. He dances in light and in shadow, and he is a great favorite. He never sleeps, the judge. He is dancing, dancing. He says he will never die. So the repetition of the phrase signifies his infinite presence in the novel. and the conclusion of, the confirmation of the Gnostic worldview therein. And then there's an epilogue, one-page epilogue. In the dawn, there's a man per ground. He uses an implement with two handles, and he chucks it into a hole in the hole with his steel hole by hole, striking the fire out of the rock which God has put there. They appear restrained by prudence or reflectiveness, which has no inner reality, and they cross their progress one by one. It has no inner reality because this is almost a parable, a Gnostic parable of people following this Malthusian techno spirit action of pulling fire from the hell hole and following this demiurge through the wasteland of the desert. He strikes fire in the hole and draws out steel. Then they all move on again. Right? Eternal return in this eon. So that's it, you guys. That is Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. Wow. What a book. That was something, huh? Man. Truly an American epic. Truly a purely American epic. I mean, it stands for, it stands for in the canon of literature. And this book will endure because of its language, its epic ferocity, its utter darkness and degradation in its depiction of the speaker's worldview. And it is ultimately a Gnostic quest, fulfilled by a demiurge. And so that is the worldview in the book. That's not one to which, I ascribe, obviously, and not the truth, because the demiurge, the character, the judge, lies. All he does is lie and mock and mimic, right? There's no salvation. When he talks about I didn't do the passage where he talks about morality. He talks about morality as a binding of humans, and that it's like a false binding that restricts them from accomplishing their true Aleister Crowley will. Well, when you speak lies, then what you're saying is a lie, right? And the only rest for these wicked is hell in that hellscape, right? They need salvation. They need God, and not this perverted demiurge, right? So anyway, that is the book. And again, just one more time, if you're watching this, please go to check out Jay's analysis, check out his essay on the book, succinctly discussing the theology and the Gnostic heresy of the narrative. And, with all that being said, about the book, I mean, the book, again, it's an anti-Moby Dick. It's a white whale terrorizing the earth, right? And I think that there is a resolution in the book. The resolution is the unconquerable will of the domination of this demiurge in the book, although that's not true, right? Let's see. Somebody dropping a fat chat here. Who's dropping a fat chat? So thank you to everybody who supported me. Thank you to Based Homeschool Mom, Rachel Wilson. Thank you to Derek Schultz, who supported me earlier this week. Thank you so much. Thank you to, let's see. Thank you to all of our other friends. Thank you to Kristen at Slow Boy Whiteboard. Appreciate you. Thank you to Stephen. Thank you to Countess Powers, to our homeboy Jethro. Thank you to our homie Arlen out there. And hopefully you guys, we're getting up there. Please share the stream, share the channel. We'll get up to 1,000 subs, and then we can get our actual super chats going here. Thank you to Ratsky. Thank you to Natesky, Ellie, all my friends out there, everybody who supported me. Thank you to Jason, everybody who's been in the chat. Thanks for coming along, y'all, on this real dark journey of Cormac McCarthy, right? And the Blood Meridian, the landscape illuminated with the electrified void, right, of death and degradation. And hopefully you guys will have a good Saturday night, and I'll see you guys soon in the JD stream. Thanks to all my homies out there, and hope everybody's doing well. I pray for y'all, and I'm so thankful to all my friends and family and homies out there. And let's keep it up. Let's keep living, okay? And let's do it. Let's go. All right, y'all. Love you all. Appreciate you. See y'all in a little bit. Peace.